Hi, my name's Michelle. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about ACOTAR, the final part of ACOTAR. Will I cry? Yeah, 100%. I will be crying. I was sobbing as I was making my notes for this video, so I imagine as I read you some of these sections, I will be crying. This includes all of my favorite bits and pieces, my favorite scene, a moment from the book, my favorite lines from the book. I love the ending of ACOTAR. We will be talking about part 3 of ACOTAR, which is called Ow. Did you hear that? My hair just pulled out of my head. That was kind of rude. Part 3 of ACOTAR, which is called Hi Lady. We are picking up with the crew. They have recently gotten word that they felt the wall has come down and war is beginning. We're in war. This section is war and battling. I think this is, sometimes people talk about how they don't love ACOTAR because of the battling, and there is a bit of battling in this section, but I really actually feel on the whole, the amount of battling per capita is not too terrible. It's very reasonable. We will kind of skim through the battles because do you care that much? No. They are all, except Amren, who is staying in the city, headed to the Illyrian war camp now to kind of ready the Illyrians, and then most of them will be going to Graysen Nolan's house to kind of put some safeguards in place for the humans, and then they will continue on to the battles in the war. So they went out to the Illyrian war camp. Lord Devlin is waiting for them as they arrive with a bunch of Illyrians. Obviously they're at Illyrian war camp. Feyre makes a note: unlike my friends, 1 or 2 siphons adored into their hands. The 7 Azriel and Cassian wore seemed almost vulgar by comparison. I love this fact. I think it's so fun. I love that Cassian and Azriel are the toughest, baddest guys in all the land, and that they have 7 siphons. And we don't talk about it that much. It's not like Rhys, where we talk about how he's the most powerful High Lord every other page. I don't care about Rhys being the most powerful High Lord. I love the fact that Az and Cassian, who are these lowly bastard-born boys, that's too hard to say because I don't want to say that about my boys. Lowly born boys actually being the most powerful Illyrians. I love it so much. I love that they have so many siphons. The whole crew is there. They're standing in front of Elain. They're I cannot believe, obviously they have to bring Elain because Elain needs to deal with the Graysen stuff, and also they're going to use her as a seer in some of the battle situations. Everyone's changed into their practical clothes for this journey. They're all in their fighting leathers, traveling clothes, except Rhys. Rhys is still in his outfit that he wore to the High Lord meeting, and he explains it's because they already know that he's tough and that he's an Illyrian. He's battle trained because they trained with him. He needs to remind them that he's also the boss of them, that also he holds this position of power. And then Devlin notices Nesta and he says, what is that of Nesta? And Cassian says, that is none of your concern. And Devlin says, is she a witch? And Feyre is gonna step in and be okay, let's not call my sister a witch. But Nesta goes, yeah. She's a witch. She's a witch. Her blood runs blue. She's a witch. Welcome to the witchdom. I think some of our favorite witches would welcome her with open arms. I feel she would fit right in to our girlies with some iron teeth. I do. I think she would have a great time. Cassian is no, she may act like one sometimes, but she's high fae. Cassian, don't tell her who she has to be. Nesta's a witch. Nesta's a witch. And she doesn't need you telling everyone that she's not. That's rude. It's rude. She's a witch. Feyre notes, 9 full-grown weathered Illyrian warlords flinched, as they should, when she said, yeah, I'm a witch. Sorry, her blood runs blue. Get her a wyvern immediately. Devlin's okay, whatever. Please keep her away from the women and children. And Feyre is holding Nesta's hand and being okay, stop. Please don't aggravate this man. Please stop telling everyone you're a witch. And then Elain is looking very nervous behind them, and Nesta's don't be afraid of them. Feyre again notes, if Elain was a blooming flower in this army camp, then Nesta, she was a freshly forged sword waiting to draw blood. Nesta's gonna cut them up. As she should. Feyre takes her sisters and Mor into their tent to discuss, and the first thing Nesta asks is hey girlies, what the heck is a witch? What's the difference between a witch and a fairy? And Mor says witches amass power beyond their natural reserves. They use spells and archaic tools to harness more power to them than the Cauldron allotted and use it for whatever they desire, good or ill. Okay, by that definition, I think Nesta is a witch. She's using spells and archaic tools to harness more power to them than the Cauldron allotted. The Cauldron did not give Nesta this power. She took it. She snatched it. And she is using it for whatever she desires. She's a witch. And then Elain asks, will many of these soldiers die? And Nesta's yeah. Probably Elain. Don't ask dumb questions. And Mor is going to glamour Elain so she can look human when they go to Graysen's estate. And they're just like prepping. The girls are like in the back, like getting ready for their mission. Well, the boys go and do boy stuff out in the war camp. And Feyre's like, hey, Elain, maybe like don't mention the visions while you are in there. Maybe just like keep them the DL. And then she's like transformed by Mor into like an ordinary drab human girly. You are still lovely, Mor said, a bit gently. Elain offered a half smile. I suppose that war makes wanting things like that unimportant. Mor was quiet for a heartbeat. Perhaps. But don't let war steal it from you, regardless. Love this. Mor is very clear here that, yes, perhaps war desires to steal from you the want to be pretty, but, like, you shouldn't let it steal from you, those like petty desires. Then it is time to go. Rhys winnows Feyre and Elain into the human lands. Mor is taking Az in Nesta. So the 6 of them are headed into the human lands. They arrive at this guarded gate to Graysen's estate. He lives in this like huge stone fortress. It looks like a prison, which is pretty much how Nesta had described it. And Elain goes up to the gates, goes up to the guards and says, tell Graysen that his betrothed has come for him. Tell him that Elain Archeron begs for sanctuary. And we learn a little bit more about like Elain and Graysen's story. We learn that they had like met at one of his father's balls because Graysen does not get out much. And Nesta comments that the ball that they went to, she's been to funerals that are merrier. And like Nesta, one thing about Nesta that I don't think we talk enough about in this book in particular is that like Nesta does love a ball. Like Nesta, despite her like generally antisocial habits, loves going dancing and loves a ball. And so like for Nesta to be like, no, the ball was, funerals have been merrier, like she's telling the truth. She's not lying here. And Elain just says, the house has needed a woman's touch for years. Girl, I don't think you're gonna transform the prison into a homey little quaint cottage, but whatever. They wait for a long while, and then a yellow flag raises, and the guard explains that Graysen will come to see her. They aren't going to be led inside like fully into the house, but they're meeting them essentially like in the guardhouse, this like gate, like just past the first gates. And they get locked into the stone room, and Feyre immediately starts to get a little antsy, and Rhys reminds her, like, this place cannot hold you. Like, you could bust out of this place so easy, girl. Don't even worry about it. But she's getting that, like, under the mountain claustrophobia again. She gets it sometimes. Nesta obviously is noticing this, and Feyre turns to Nesta and explains that, like, sometimes she gets this way with small spaces. And Nesta says to her, I can't get into a bathtub anymore. I have to use buckets. And, like, Feyre's heart kind of, like, breaks at that. This, like, it's a moment in which she was, like, anticipating Nesta to be cruel to her. And Nesta doesn't not return this like admission with cruelty. Nesta returns it instead with like a confession of her own. This like I know what it is to like have something like terrible to happen to you and to have like the lingering repercussions of that. Look, I'm already tearing. Just like continue to exist in your everyday life, even though they don't totally make sense. And Feyre says to Nesta, we will have something installed for you when we get home, like something else. Like, don't even worry. Like, we'll take care of it. We'll take care of it. Because Feyre is like such a caretaker of her sisters. And so I think for Feyre, like her response to any of her sisters having any sort of like distress is to try to fix it. We'll continue to talk about it in this section because we see this as the sisters. This section is probably like one of the sections in which we see the sisters, probably the section in all of the books that we see the sisters together in like a happy way. In the entire book. And I think this, like, we see Feyre's like desire to caretake for her sisters. It is like something that she feels like very compelled to do, even when it's like kind of unnecessary. They're waiting. Az and Rhys are obviously listening to what is happening outside of the room. They hear footsteps outside, and Feyre thinks to herself, any attempt to hurt Elain, I did not care what I had promised my sister. I'd leave Nesta to shred him. Indeed, my eldest sister's fingers had curled, as if invisible talons had crowned them. And Graysen comes into the room, his father right behind them, and his father, Lord Norland, says, what is the meaning of this? And Elain tries to kind of like explain, but she's like immediately floundering. Clearly she's like stressed, overwhelmed. And then Nesta steps up and says, the wall has come down. And Graysen says, how? And not meaning the wall, but clearly meaning like Nesta. She is not glamored. Nesta is not glamored. And she's like so very clearly like high fae and like something more. Like Nesta gives spooky vibes the moment you look at her. And so he's a little like, how the heck did that happen? And Nesta kind of explains that they were kidnapped by Hybern and dunked into the cauldron, came out fae. And then the rest of the crew introduce themselves, and Graysen says, Elain, why are you with them? And Nesta says, because she is our sister, and there is no safer place for her during this war than with us. Elain's like, I came to ask you to open your gates for any human who can reach them before the war comes. Like, there's not enough time for full evacuations, and the queens will not send aid from the continent for the humans, but if they're able to come here, they might be able to survive. And Graysen says, with pain in his eyes, I would be inclined to believe you if you were not lying to me with your every breath. They know she has been glamored, and he knows that she's been glamored. They kind of have already heard the story of the Archeron sisters. And Rhys says, we don't care what you believe. We only come to ask you to help those who cannot defend themselves. And Nolan seems to know that not only has Elain been turned into a High Fae, but she has a High Lord's son as her mate. And Rhys is like, who told you all of this? And then Jorian strolls into the guardhouse. I did. And Jorian explains that, like, he's alone. He's like, don't even freak out, guys. I'm alone. I actually, like, came to Graysen's house and explained to him what is happening and what the deal with the Archeron sisters is and the Mortal Queens, and, like, tried to get him as, like, humans to help us. And Feyre's like, okay, why? She's, like, ready to murder this guy. This guy has been nothing but trouble this whole book, you know? And Jorian says the queens are snakes and deserve to be butchered. The King of Hybern, I have a note here, but it's a Throne of Glass spoiler, so unfortunately I'm going to leave it out, just in case you haven't read Throne of Glass, because that's important to me. Okay. The King of Hybern had, like, resurrected Jorian in order to, like, turn him to his side because he assumed that all of that time spent as Amarantha's reign would have made him go crazy. This has always, like, the motivations here, like, to me, don't totally make sense, especially with the King of Hybern. Like, why would you assume that Jorian being kind of, like, trapped in Amarantha's ring, who, like, Amarantha worked for King of Hybern, like, she was his intern? Why would you assume that he would be like, yeah, I'm going to be on your team now? So much so that you, like, resurrect him. I kind of don't get Jorian's role in this. I'm kind of perplexed by it a little bit, but whatever. And then Jorian says, Mor, to be honest, it's kind of rude that after fighting together in the last war, that you believed that I would just turn evil. And Mor's like, well, you kind of went a little crazy with the Clythia stuff. It, like, sort of destroyed you. And Jorian is like, well, to buy us an edge in that war, I was willing to do it. And Rhys is like, well, you played the villain convincingly enough, Jorian. Like, you did, like, you, like, wrecked Cassian's wings and, like, shot Azriel in the guts. Like, you were kind of, like, really seriously looking like the evil guy. And Jorian is like, why didn't you look in my noggin? You should have looked. I expected you to look into my mind and see the truth. Why didn't you? And Rhys is like, I didn't want to see her. Because, like, Jorian was a witness to all of Amarantha's cruelty because he was her ring. And so he was there during all of the stuff that Rhys endured under the mountain. Rhys didn't really want to go relive that. And Jorian's like, obviously, I've been a double agent for Hybern. And he says, we're better to plot your enemy's demise, to learn their weaknesses, than at their side. And he explains that he wants to find Mirian and Draken to not to kill them, but to beg their forgiveness for what he did to them in the war. And Rhys is immediately like, we don't know where they are. Okay. Maybe, like, keep this in the deal. I don't know. I, like, know Rhys now went into Jorian's brain and, like, they've, like, cleared him. And they know he's not lying. But, like, I think maybe we should keep a few cards a little closer to our chest. Like, we just met this man again. Well, we didn't just meet him. Like, we've known him. But, like, we thought he was evil and, like, literally 5 minutes ago, and now we're like, we don't know where they are. Like, maybe keep that a little more secret. And then Jorian says, find them. And he tells Rhys to look at his head. Oh, so he hasn't actually looked in his head yet. I don't think Rhys looks in his head until after he, like, reveals his information about Miriam and Draken. Like, Rhys, keep it to yourself. Anyway, Jorian explains that he is here because the wall came down, and now he can move freely to warn the humans, because Tamlin ran right back to Hybern after your meeting ended this morning, right back to their camp in the Spring Court, where Hybern now plans to launch an assault on Summer Court tomorrow. Both Rhys and Feyre take a little peek inside Jorian's brain, decide he's chill, and they find out the details about the Summer Court attack. Jorian explains that they didn't kill the sixth queen, that she is not dead, but she was yapping too much, and the Golden Queen didn't like it. Since they couldn't kill her for, like, some reason, they, like, explain, I think it has to do with, like, the line of succession. They sent her to an old Death Lord, which is, like, her situation that's happening in the lake, which I do think we will be addressing in Elain's book, that I do think is coming. And Mor is like, we know. And Elain is like, I didn't mean to deceive you. She's talking to Graysen. And Graysen says, did you think you could come back here and live with me like this? Live as a lie? And Elain is like, well, I don't know what I wanted. And Graysen goes on, and you're bound to some Fae male, a High Lord's son, a different High Lord's heir, likely, I wanted to say. Okay, favorite, why did you want to say that? I actually don't think this is the time at all. Like, why were you like, I actually think Lucien is not heir to Autumn Court, but indeed heir to Day Court. Like, that is information that we need to keep, like, very zipped up and probably not give to some randos. like Jurian and Graysen. Why are you compelled to say this out loud? Feyre has a secret and she like literally wants to tell everyone. Oh my gosh, it's eating her up and alive. The fact that she has figured out that like Lucien is probably Helian's son. Elain says his name is Lucien, and Graysen says, I don't care what his name is. You are his mate. Do you even know what that means? And Elain says it means nothing. I don't care who decided it or why they did. And Graysen says you belong to him. And Elain says, I belong to no one, but my heart belongs to you. There is, to me, these like Graysen encounter. I feel like people do not talk about Graysen enough, like in the fandom. I feel like we will see Graysen again in Elaine's book. Graysen is like pretty mean in this book to Elain in a way that makes it seem like, okay, is he just purely a bad guy? Initially, I was, as you know, if you've watched the other videos in this series, I was like, maybe Graysen will come back and be like a tertiary love interest for Elain. And I still think he might. I still think maybe all of this is like some sort of like facade to keep his dad from like realizing what's happening, or because he's like worried that there's some sort of like danger that he'd be putting Elain in by confessing his true feelings. Elain clearly like deeply loves this man, does not take off her iron engagement ring. We'll just see a scene in a second. And he's like mean to her. Like he is not kind to her. But I'm wondering if he has like part of me is a little sus of Graysen being meaner sent. Like, part of me thinks that, like, maybe he's being sneaky. And, like, I think he might roll on back. That, like, maybe it's not Az versus Lucien. Maybe it's Az versus Lucien versus Graysen versus 12 other people. I, like, feel like we don't really know what Elaine's tale is going to be. Or, like, it was fairly clear from the Nesta Cassian stuff that, like, Nesta's book was going to be a Nesta Cassian book. Like, we'll see in this book. Who else? Anyway, back to the book. Feyre explains what they want from Noland and how that they will provide wards for the walls and they will like make this an even more secure location. And Noland like does not want help from the Fae. He does not trust them at all. And then Jurian is like, hey, I fought beside your ancestors and they would be embarrassed if you did not help those who needed your protection. And then he's like, also, if you don't help people, I will tell Hybern to come get ya. He's like, I'm still in Hybern's ear, and I can either say we should avoid this area, or I can tell them to come right to your house and eat you up. So, like, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? And Noland says, you've threatened to bring the very enemy you seek to protect us from? And Jurian says, I could also steal Hybern away from your house, your choice. And Graysen demands the ring back from Elain, and Elain doesn't want to give it back, and he's literally shouting in her face. This is where I was like, okay, maybe Graysen is no longer a viable love interest. And then Rhys has to step in and be like, hey, you gave her the ring. Gifts, no takesy-backsies on gifts. If she doesn't want to give it back to you, she wants to keep it, she can. And Graysen says, is this the start of it? You Fae males will come to take our women, are your own not beautiful. Let's say beautiful. He doesn't say beautiful, but we're trying to keep it PG-13. Enough. I'm not marrying you. Our engagement is over. I will take whatever people occupy your lands, but not you. Never you. And then I was like, oh, you know, maybe he's not going to be the third love interest. This is kind of something I don't know if you can walk yourself back from, but we'll see. I don't know. Rhys walked himself back from worse, and I let him do it with no questions. I said, walk on back. Come on back, Rhys. And then Nesta steps forward and slaps him in the face, as she should. Nesta says to him, you never deserved her. If Graysen does come back and try to win Elain back, oh, he's gonna have to fight Nesta. Like, maybe physically. He might have to fight her, and she is Fae, and she does train in the next book. Nesta then turns to Feyre. I assume we're done here. And then she grabs Elain's hand and leads her out of the guardhouse. Jurian's heading back to Hybern with the cover story that he was looking for Marianne and Draken, and unfortunately he wasn't able to find them. And then Jurian gives gives some instructions to like give to Cassian. Cassian's not there, about what angles he should approach the attacks for Summer Court tomorrow. And then Jurian says to Feyre, I never congratulated you for slaughtering Dagon and Bragnog. Good riddance. And Feyre says, I did it for the children of the blessed, not for glory. I know, Jurian said, flicking up his brows. Why do you think I decided to trust you? Wartime. We're at our first battle. They are camped at the northern border of Wintercourt with the Illyrian army getting ready for the attack tomorrow. They have already sent a warning to Tarquin and Helian and they've sent a warning to Tarquin that there's going to be another attack at Summercourt, and told Elain and Callus, day and winter, to send troops if they can. In the morning, the Illyrians will fly down there, and Kier will winnow in the Darkbringer commanders. And Feyre is talking to Mor about why she never considered the fact that Jurian might be good. And Mor was like, I really did think he was like pretty messed up from being an eyeball ring for 500 years. Like, that would mess with a person's head, you know? And Mor asks about Elain, who has just been like despondent since they've gotten back. She's just been like weeping and staring at the wall in her tent, like just broken after returning. But she still hasn't taken off that engagement ring. Feyre thinks, I debated returning to smash every bone in Graysen's body, but resisted, if only because it would give Nesta license to unleash herself upon him, and death at Nesta's hands. I'd wondered if they have to invent a new word for killing when she was done with Graysen. No, but wouldn't it be so interesting if Graysen came back and he was like, sorry, I had to keep you safe from my dad. And Nesta says, I'm actually going to rip all the bones out of your body and turn them into soup and feed it to you. I just think it would be kind of fun. I like hope we get to see him again. I think we will. I don't think it would make sense for Elaine's book to not have any closure regarding the Graysen situation, because we definitely do not get closure on it in this book. And I have not read A Court of Frost and Starlight, so I don't know if we do in that book either. I've never heard anything about it, but yes, that is true. I haven't read A Court of Frost and Starlight. I have read Silver Flames. I just skipped that one. It was a novella, and I said, not for me. Not for me, guys. I will be reading it and recapping it for you, obviously. I'm excited. I have a Sarah J. Maas book this year. None of you do, but I do. Feyre barely sleeps that night, and Rhys never returns to the tent. And just before dawn, she heads out and finds him following the mating bond to him. He's sitting on a cliffside just staring out over the field, the camp, and he says, a lot of soldiers are going to die today. It never gets easier. And he turns to his wife, he turns to Feyre and says, are you ready? Feyre is not fighting in this battle. She's going to stay with Mor in the back of things, and Nesta and Elain will stay at camp. They will not be winnowed to the battle itself. Feyre says no, but I have no other choice but to be ready. And Rhys says, I am grateful to have you at my side. I don't know if I've ever told you that, how grateful I am to have you stand with me. Battle time! Jurian's tips had been correct, and Hybern seems genuinely surprised to see Rhys and his troops. Rhys shields all of his troops until the very last moment for like a big dramatic entrance, because like Rhys thrives on a little drama. The boys are in their little war outfits. They have these little Batman hats on. They're like helmets that have like raven's wings on the side. I think they probably are Batman helmets, but they're bat wings. They're dressed up like Batman. My notes just say war, fighting. So those are the details there. Cassian is fighting this Hybern commander, and it's like so impressive. It's so impressive that Rhys stops fighting. They're in the middle of a battle. Rhys stops fighting for a moment to watch. And Feyre is watching from like above on this like cliffside, and Feyre says it's like dancing or a symphony. Like it is just like there's something almost beautiful about the way that Cassian fights. They do end up winning the battle. Tarquin winds up drowning all the prisoners of war that they get, which, you know, is kind of yuck to me a little bit. I do think in terms of Hybern, we do lose kind of all sense of like the complex relationship between like soldiers and the armies that they participate in, in which we're treating every Hybern soldier as if they are fully complicit in this war, understanding everything that goes into it, and not just someone who is like obligated to participate within a larger power structure. But, you know, sometimes you need the bad guys to just be evil. This book definitely does not address like the complexities of the morality of war in any capacity. They're like Hybern bad guys. We good guys. I do think this is kind of like something that Romantasy does often, is they make the enemies like, they need to make them like pure evil. There can be like no moral gray in terms of the people that they're fighting, because there is like murder. And I don't think our girlies, because our girlies are written by modern women and being read by modern women, could like deal with the morality of like killing people who as individuals are like relatively innocent in the larger scope of war. Like the random foot soldiers in Hybern are like not responsible for the policy choices and procedures of Hybern. Hybern seems like a bad guy place, so it seems like they probably aren't just like recruiting people who like love fighting, love this policy. And even if they are, like to what level have they been like really shown the truth of other options? You know? Whatever. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. You can't be everything for every book, you know? After the battle, they move the Illyrian war camp from the border of Wintercourt down to the edge of the Summer Court battle, and Mor and Feyre win out and fetch Nesta and Elain last once the camp is like all set up. Elain is not doing well. Elain is not doing well. She's very depressed and a little catatonic. Like, she is just like stared at the wall. And Nesta is much more observant. Nesta is much more with it. She is hearing all of these stories about Cassian and how impressive Cassian was in the battle. And then when she makes sure Elain is like settled in their tent, she goes to help. She is cutting up linen for bandages with Feyre when Rhys and Cassian come over to the campfire where like Nesta is like chopping these bandages up. Rhys and Cassian come and sit down next to them on the campfire. They're both like clearly exhausted. Rhys grabs a pitcher of water and Feyre's going to go like pour him a glass, and he just like takes from the pitcher and starts chugging it out of the pitcher. And then Nesta says to Cassian, "You're injured." And she reaches for his arm under his armor, his wrist is all swollen. Like, no one else noticed, but obviously Nesta has, because Nesta is watching Cassian like so closely, obviously. And Rhys says, "Hey," to Cassian, "you know better than to walk around with an injury. That's like not something we do during a war." Cassian's like, "I'm busy," and it was like not that big of a deal. And Nesta says to him, "How do I fix it?" And Cassian says, "Icing it usually helps, but wrapping it will lock it in place just long enough for the sprain to repair itself." And Nesta grabs some of those bandages she's been cutting up and the water at her feet, and she like tends to Cassian's wound. This is Feyre's perspective on it. "I was too tired to do anything other than watch as she washed his wrist, his hand, her own fingers gentle, too tired to ask if she possessed the magic to heal it herself." Cassian seemed too weary to speak as well while she wrapped the bandages around his wrist, only grunting to confirm it was too tight or too loose, if it helped at all. But he watched her, didn't take his eyes off her face, the brows bunched and lips pursed in concentration. And after he's finished, Cassian says, "Thank you," and like brushes his hand over Nesta's. And Nesta's about to say something when who should show up but my worst nemesis, the woman I hate more than anyone else in this novel, and that is Mor. Mor shows up, and Cassian snatches his hand back from Nesta. "I'm calling the police on you." Then Mor's like, "Oh, are you hurt?" And Cassian says, "Nothing for you to cry over, don't worry." And then Nesta gets up and leaves. She pretends to go get more water, but she's gone for a while. Meanwhile, Cassian and Mor banter back and forth. Mor better watch her back. Mor, Nesta, and Feyre help the wounded all night long. Mor is like clearly a little annoyed that she wasn't able to fight in this battle because she was in charge of like babysitting Feyre and the girls. Feyre then heads to bed, and Rhys is already in bed. My note here just says, Sarah J. Maas loves in this section to talk about how smelly everything is. She's like, the camp is stinky, Rhys is stinky, the bed is stinky, I'm stinky. And I'm like, please, I don't need to know everything was stinky. That doesn't add to my vibes. Like, if this were Game of Thrones and we were in like a kind of a grittier situation, maybe I'd be cool with some stink. But like, I'm gonna pretend that everyone smells neutral, that it's not stinky. I don't want to know it's stinky there. That's not for me to know. I want everything to smell like peppermint and pine nuts, or whatever the love interests smell like. They smell like rosemary and rose water. You know, like, I want it to smell like a romantic hero. Somebody light a candle. Why is it so stinky out here? Rhys and Feyre do hook up real quickly. And then Feyre's like, "Hey, so after watching the battle today, I actually don't think I'm going to be battling. I don't think I'm going to be a battling girl." Seems like not for me. And Rhys is like, "That's fine. If like you change your mind, you ever want to fight, want to train with a unit, fight alongside me, like you can. I would be like so honored to have you fight next to me, but if not, like also totally cool." And then Feyre's like, "I kind of feel like a coward for not wanting to fight in the war." Rhys is like, "War is like more than just the battles. Like, it is very important for you to be here and like attending these strategy meetings and attending to the wounded. Like, the men see your participation and they know that you're like here supporting the war effort in like the way that you can. Like, you don't need to be battling. Like, it's okay. You're doing other things that are also important." Tarquin's army is their next door neighbor when they're camping. It's unclear if Tim Tam went back to Hybern and like told them everything for the meetings. They kind of assume so. Nesta has been trying to like keep an eye on the Cauldron through their connection so that they can have a little bit of warning before it is used again. Amren is still back in Velaris, looking through the Book of Breathings, trying to find some way to disable it. They don't want to bring in Bryaxis yet until they know where like all of Hybern's troops are. They imagine that the section that they fought today at the battle was like definitely not all of them. 5 days later, as they've been camping and waiting, Az comes to them and announces that Hybern is headed for Wintercourt's border, which is like weird. They're like unclear why that would happen. And they're a little bit worried about what they need to do because they don't have enough soldiers to split them. They can't leave people here to defend this place and also send enough to defeat them on the Wintercourt. And they're worried that if they send everyone to Wintercourt, that they will like get surprise attacked at their like from behind. And so they decide to do both. Tricky. They're going to create a glamour over like of this camp to make it look like it is still like active and poppin', and then they're actually going to head up north to Wintercourt. Feyre and Rhys are tasked with doing this. They work through the night to copy the movements of the soldiers so that they will appear to be there when they leave. Very like Home Alone sort of situation. Rhys is going to shield them again so no one can see them, and Cressida does the same sort of like glamour for the Summer Court soldiers, so like both camps will look there. And then Tarquin winnows all non-flying soldiers up to Wintercourt, while the flying soldiers will fly up there, obviously. They wait until the end of the day to attack, hoping that Hybern would already be worn out from the like walking. Elain winds up staying in her tent the entire battle, but Nesta watches alongside Mor and Feyre. Nesta only has eyes for Cassian. Like, she is just watching Cassian and his red siphons the whole battle. Hybern unfortunately was ready this time, and things are much worse than the first time. Hybern like slices right through Kyr's Darkbringers. Cassian is working hard to try to reform the lines, but he just continues to get surrounded by Hybern's forces. And Hybern had managed to hide a huge number of their forces, and they are just overwhelmed by the quantity. They just do not have the manpower to stand up against Hybern. And Feyre knows she needs to go find the Suriel and ask him about the location of Hybern's true army so that they can figure out like what are they truly up against. They can't keep getting surprised by the numbers, and also so they can like figure out what to do with like Bryaxis and like their like larger weapons, when would be the best time strategically to deploy those. And so Feyre hatches a little baby scheme. She tells Mor, she's like, Mor, you gotta be down there battling with the boys. And Mor is like, I cannot just leave you guys up here by yourself. Like, Rhys would kill me if he knew that you were just alone. And Feyre's like, we will be fine. I'm not defenseless, and there are wards around the camp. Like, no one's gonna come up here. But like the boys need your help. Like, Cassian and Azriel both like clearly need some assistance. And Mor is like, okay, just be on your guard, both of you. And then Mor heads down to the battlefield, immediately joining Azriel, fighting, and they're both like cutting a path towards Cassian. And then Feyre starts to leave, like almost immediately after Mor's gone. And Nesta's like, you're leaving? And Feyre's like, I'll be back so soon. Bye. Feyre doesn't know where the Suriel is, so she goes to Elain to see if Elain can use her seer abilities to find him. And Elain is like, I literally don't know how to do this. And Feyre's like, maybe we should have sent you to Amryn school too. Yeah, probably. Probably everyone should have gone to Amryn school. But Feyre's like, okay, let's just give it a shot. She plants the image of the Suriel in Elain's mind. Elain doesn't really have shields. She has these like garden gates, we're told. This like blooming open gate garden. And so she plants the image of the Suriel there, and Elain is able to locate him vaguely. He's on the move, but it looks like he's headed towards the Weaver's house. And so she heads there. She feels the spooky ooky vibes of the middle, this place where like the Weaver lives, and draws her dagger, and the Suriel is like right there. He says, have you come to kill me or to beg for my help once again, Feyre Archeron? The Suriel was not wearing the cloak that Feyre had got it, but a new one that was already like quite tattered. And the Suriel says to her, thrice we have met, thrice now you have hunted for me. This time you have sent the trembling fawn to find me. I did not expect to see those doe eyes peering at me from across the world. And Feyre's like, I'm so sorry if it was a violation, but like it was an urgent matter. I really needed to talk to you. And the Suriel's like, yeah, you wish to know where Hybern is hiding its army. Even I cannot see that. And the Suriel goes on to explain that the Hybern is using the Cauldron to cloak its location, and because it's like an old magic older than him, he's unable to like get past it. But he suggests that because Nesta is made of the same thing that the Cauldron is made out of, and because like calls to like, she will be able to locate the Cauldron, which is where his army will be located. So she should try scrying. Nesta should try scrying to find it. And Feyre asks why it didn't work last time she tried to nullify the Cauldron, and the Suriel explains she didn't hold on long enough, and Feyre would essentially have needed to die to nullify the Cauldron because that was the cost. That's like the cost of that level of power. And the Suriel can't see the outcome of the war, especially because of these like creatures like the Bone Carver and Bryaxis coming into play, because they are older than he is, they're from another world, and so he like can't see their effects on things. But like possibly, maybe there's a chance. And then Feyre asks about the Ouroboros Mirror and whether she'll go mad if she looks into it. And the Suriel says, "You are afraid to look, to see what is within. Only you can decide what breaks you, Cursebreaker. Only you. Tell the silver-eyed messenger that the answer lies in the second and penultimate pages of the book. Together they hold the key." And Feyre says, "The key to what?" And then the Suriel says, "The answer to what you need to stop Hyde." And he's cut off as an ash arrow cuts through him. And there's a whole bunch of ash arrows flying. And Ianthe walks into this little clearing. And Ianthe says, "Why does it talk to you, Feyre, when it would not even deign to speak with me?" And she has arrived with 2 other Hybern soldiers. Feyre's hiding behind a tree, and she knows she could winnow away, but she feels bad leaving the Suriel just like in the middle of the woods. In the middle of the middle. And the Suriel is trying to get her to run. Like, the Suriel's like, "Get out of here, girl." Ianthe, meanwhile, is evil villain monologuing in the middle of things. Ianthe says, "It took the King of Hybern days to unravel what you did to me. I still can't use most of my hand. I'd heard," and then she goes on to explain that she had heard from Tamlin how Feyre had captured the Suriel a couple times. And so Ianthe had, like, modified Feyre's methods, but, like, even after capturing him, the Suriel would not tell her anything. But Ianthe was like, "I knew that you would probably come looking for him again. And so I put a tracking spell in this cloak that I gave him. And the tracking spell, I knew once Feyre was in the vicinity of the tracking spell, it would alert Ianthe. And then Ianthe, because it could, like, winnow there. That was, like, the plan of the scheme." And the Suriel again is like, "Run, Feyre, run." And Ianthe says to her, "The king built shields in my mind to keep you from harming me again when I found you." Feyre finally steps out from behind the tree, and she says to Ianthe, "I should have slit your throat that night in the tent." They shoot an arrow at her. Feyre is able to block it with her, like, air magic. She's able to put up, like, a shield of air, but it's clear that her shield is not going to survive many more hits. And Feyre starts running away because she wants to draw Ianthe away and the guards away from the Suriel so he can escape. She's like, "I gotta buy him a little bit of time." So she starts to run through a familiar patch of trees. And after making sure the whole gang is following her, Feyre runs straight into the Weaver's cottage, pretending that she just thinks she's like, "Help me, someone." Feyre is holding the door open with, like, all of her might. Like, the door is trying to, like, slam close and lock her inside, as the Weaver can smell her, and the Weaver is calling out, "Thief." And Ianthe says, you do know we'll have to kill whoever is inside there with you. Selfish of you, Feyre." Feyre is hiding behind the door, and the Weaver is moving closer to her. And the Weaver says, "You have seen my twin. I smell him on you. What are you?" And Ianthe says, "Feyre, you can be quite tedious. Do you think you can ambush us in there? I saw your shield. You're drained. And I do not think your glowing trick will help." And the Weaver says, "Who did you bring, little wolf? Who did you bring to me?" And Feyre says, "Dinner." And then Feyre waits until Ianthe and the guards step into the cottage, and then as soon as they're inside, she darts out from behind the door, letting it slam closed behind her as she sprints into the forest. And she can hear them screaming in the cottage as she runs away. And then she races back to the Suriel. He hasn't moved, but he, like, is clearly dying. Like, his breathing is, like, quite labored at this point. And Feyre offers to help him. And the Suriel is like, "Your magic is spent. Like, you don't have enough to do so. Do not waste it on me." And Feyre is like, "I can save you." And the Suriel says, "I am already gone, but will you stay with me till the end?" I took its hand in mine. "I'm sorry," was all I could think to say. "I had done this. I had brought it here." "I knew," I gasped, sensing my shift in thoughts. "The tracking, I knew of it. Then why come at all? You were kind. You fought your fear. You were kind," it said again. I began crying. "And you were kind to me," I said, not brushing away the tears that fell into its bloodied, tattered robe. "Thank you for helping me when no one else would." A small smile on that lipless mouth. Feyre Archeron, a labored breath. "I told you to stay with the High Lord, and you did. It's warning to me the first time we'd met. You meant Rhys. All this time. Stay with him, and live to see everything righted. Yes, I did, and it was. No, not yet. Stay with him. I will. I always would." And then the Suriel is like, "Okay, actually, I changed my mind. You need to leave now because I'm nearly gone and my, like, blood will draw all of the worst monsters from the forest." But before she goes, he has one last request for her. He says to her, "Leave this world a better place than how you found it." And its chest rose and stopped altogether. As its breath escaped one last sigh, I knew why the Suriel had come to help me again and again. Not just for kindness, but because it was a dreamer. Well, and Feyre cries, and obviously I cried too when I was reading this section. I'm getting teary just reading it because the Suriel is a dreamer. Oh my God, it ripped my heart out of my chest. Luckily Elain comes to get her, which is good because it is, and he, like, has a hand on her shoulder as she's, like, weeping over the Suriel, and she says, and Elain says to her, "Come, it is not safe." He burns the Suriel for her with like a proper burial, and Feyre asks Elain for his cloak, and he covers the Suriel with this like magnificent, beautiful, because Elain knows how to have an outfit, cloak. And then Feyre thanks him one last time, and Elain takes her back to the war camp. Feyre is immediately brought back to Rhys's war tent, and Feyre immediately just like breaks down and starts sobbing, and Rhys is just like holding her as she just like cries over the loss of the Suriel, this like creature that was like supposed to be monstrous, but like really just like, he was a good guy. I think he maybe would have eaten Feyre if given the opportunity, but like, you know, he didn't. When she calms down, Rhys updates her about how the battle went. They'd won, barely. Tarquin had again decided what to do with any of the survivors, and Cassian had been gravely injured. Feyre races to the tent where the healer is working on Cass, while Az and Mor watch. Feyre lets Rhys stand into her brain to show him what the Suriel had said to her, and Rhys lets her know that Amren is on the way with the book to help Nesta track the Cauldron. Cassian is going to be fine, but he's not going to be able to fight for a few days because he was so gravely injured. Mor says to Feyre, "Where did you go?" She's clearly mad. And Rhys says, "You are, as always, free to go wherever and whenever you wish, but what I think Mor's saying is try to leave a note next time." Clearly, Mor and Rhys were terrified when they got back to camp, and like Feyre was gone and had no idea where she went. And I'm so sure that Nesta got yelled at so hard. Like, I'm sure these people were like, "Where did she go? What did you do to her? Where is she?" Like, and Nesta, we'll find out, didn't tell them anything. Not that Feyre like was like, "Nesta, I'm gonna go get the Suriel," but like, she didn't even say like, "Oh, she went and talked to Elain." She's just like, "I don't know. You're not the boss of me." I'm sure Rhys tried to pull rank. He's like, "I'm the High Lord." And Nesta said, "Not mine. Not my High Lord." I don't know who you think you're talking to. And then Feyre says, like, "Sorry." And then Feyre had this conversation mentally. Rhys says, "It's fine. Just let me know next time." And Feyre says, "Would you have let me go if I had?" And Rhys says, "I do not let you do anything. You are your own person. You make your own choices, but we are mates. I am yours and you are mine. We do not let each other do things as if we dictate the movements of each other, but I might have insisted to go with you. More for my own mental well-being, just to know you were safe." And then Rhys says to her, "I wonder if the Weaver forgives you now. The Suriel wasn't your fault." Like, both of these thoughts. And then Cassian opens his eyes, and Feyre is like wondering where Nesta is. She's like shocked that Nesta isn't in this tent, like checking on Cassian, because like obviously Nesta cares about Cassian. And I'm sure it's because she just got yelled the heck out by Mor. I would not put it past Mor for Mor to say like, "You can't come check on Cassian because you won't tell us where Feyre is." That witch. Not nice. Witch. Positive Nesta. Witch. Derogatory Mor. Cassian opens his eyes. Cassian asks, "Did we win and how bad?" And Rhys says, "We managed. Kier took heavy hits, but we won, barely. To answer the first, don't you ever pull that kind of shit again. Your guts were hanging out, you stupid prick. Az held them in for you." And Cassian says, "I'm a soldier. It's part of the job." And Rhys says, "I gave you an order to wait and you ignored it." And Cassian says, "The line was breaking. Your order was bullshit." Rhys braced his hands on either side of Cassian's legs and snarled in his face, "I am your High Lord. You don't get to disregard orders you do not like." And Cassian says, "Don't pull rank because you're pissed off." And the boys fight back and forth a little bit because they like clearly like love each other so deeply. Like, these guys are like brothers, and it's like really sweet. It is this like fight between them over like Rhys just being so worried for Cassian. Hurts my heart a little bit. Feyre leaves the tent with Mor and Az soon after that and finds Nesta just like standing with an empty bucket of water near like at the nearest empty tent. Feyre says to her, "He's fine, healed and awake." And Nesta like visibly like takes an exhale. And then Mor says, "Shouldn't you be refilling that bucket?" I'm literally gonna cut off her fingers. I'm going to slice off Mor's fingers. And Mor's like, "She didn't even bother to tell anyone that you'd left." And Feyre says, "Nesta is many things, but she is loyal." Yeah, she doesn't owe you guys anything. Her sister, she trusts her sister. And she's loyal to her sister. And if her sister left, she probably had a good reason to do so and not tell anyone. Mor is like really pissed off about the whole Feyre leaving and not telling anyone thing. She feels like she was like tricked into going to fight, which she kind of was, so that Feyre could leave without saying anything. And she says to her, I know everything you're about to say, every excuse for why I couldn't go with you, Mor snapped, but none of it excuses you for lying to me. If you'd explained, I would have let you go. If you'd trusted me, I would have let you go, or maybe talked you out of an idiotic idea that nearly got you killed. They are hunting for you. They wanted to get your hands on you and use you, hurt you. You've only seen a taste of what Hybern can do, what they delight in, and to break you to his will, the king will do anything. Do you know what it felt like to look Rhys in the eye and tell him I had no idea where you were? To realize for myself that you had vanished and likely duped me into enabling it. I thought you were smarter than that, better than that sort of thing. The words sent a line of fire searing across my vision, burning down my spine. I'm not gonna listen to this. I turned to leave, but Mor was already there, gripping my arm. Oh yes, you are. Rhys might be all smiles and forgiveness, but you still have us to answer to. You are my high lady. Do you understand what it means when you imply that you don't trust us to help you, to respect your wishes if you want to do something alone, when you lie to us? And Feyre's like, well, actually, you're a liar too. I might be lying, but you lie all the time. Why haven't you ever made a move for Azriel, Mor? Why did you invite Healy into your bed? You clearly found no pleasure in it. I saw the way you looked the next day, so before you accuse me of being a liar, I'd suggest you take a hard look at yourself. And then Mor's like, get away from me. Get away from me. Because Feyre, that was a low blow. Like, what you did was not kind. Like, you should have left a note for everyone. Okay? That was not a kind thing to do. It was not a good leadership thing to do. Like, it wasn't great. But to, like, go for, like, Mor's personal life, to clearly an issue that is, like, quite sensitive. In this moment, it was a low blow. It was a low blow. And sometimes I'm like, Feyre and Nesta are the same sides, are two sides of the same coin. Because that wasn't kind. Amren arrives, like, almost immediately after this, and she says, every time you lot leave me at home, someone manages to get gutted. She, like, has obviously talking about Cassian, but has also, I think, witnessed the tail end of the Mor and Feyre disagreement. Amren then warns Feyre, be careful how you push her. There's some truth that even the Morgan has not faced herself. The girls in this book, I know I was talking about how, like, Feyre got, like, a female friend, but, like, sort of no. The girls in this book are, like, quite standoffish and quite isolated. Like, both Mor and Amren have warned of the other, like, don't push them, like, they'll snap and they'll go crazy. Like, I just kind of feel like they're not girls. They, like, no one really has close friends in the story. Like, everyone is, Amren and Mor, I guess, as our two women, don't really have, like, close friends in which they've, like, expressed things to, and they clearly aren't close with each other, and, like, we see no evidence of, like, other friendship groups. It's kind of sad, especially when we see in contrast to, like, the boys, and the boys are, like, so close. Like, the boys are truly, like, brothers to each other, and then we have, like, Mor and Amren and Feyre, who are, like, close, but also, like, they don't seem to know much about each other. Like, really, like, do they actually have, like, interpersonal, intimate conversations? I don't feel they do. What a sad time. Don't worry, Silver Flames will get girls. And Amren's like, I think you should maybe, like, give Mor a moment to cool off, like, table this conversation. You both seem a little too cranky for it. Cassian gets, like, carried. He's, like, half dead, but he gets carried into the war meeting, like, a limp body, but at least they put him in a new outfit. Feyre conveys what the Suriel had said about the Book of Breathings, and then Nesta arrives at the table. She looks over at Cassian, just, like, super briefly before turning to Amren, and Feyre's wondering, how long had Nesta stood atop that hill, watching the battle? Had she seen him fall? I would bet money that she did. I would bet so much money that Nesta never left that spot on the edge of the battlefield, and she watched as Cassian fell and did not know if he survived. Then Amren throws a bag of stones on the table, and Rhys mentally tells Feyre, your sister came immediately when I explained what we needed, Rhys said. I think seeing Cassian hurt convinced her not to pick a fight today. I don't think that's true. Actually, like, ever since the battling has started, Nesta has been, like, so helpful. Elain has been exceptionally unhelpful, like, laying in her room and being depressed. I'm, like, not saying anything about Elain needing to be out here and, like, helping people, but Elain, like, gets so much grace for, like, not helping. And if, like, Nesta is, like, a little cranky about helping, suddenly she's the worst woman alive. Like, she has actively been helping. She's been, like, cutting bandages, and she has, like, been listening, and, like, yeah, she's a little snappy. That's just, like, who Nesta is. To, like, treat her as if she has, like, been had to be, like, tricked into helping in every capacity is just, like, so, I don't love it. Because she's been helpful, and I think she would have been helpful even if Cassian hadn't been hurt. Nesta says, okay, so, like, I scatter these, like, some backstreet charlatan, and then they find the cauldron. So I like shake them in my hands and just chuck them. How am I supposed to make any sense of that? And Amber explains that she needs to cast her mind towards the cauldron, towards like through the bond that links them. But she isn't supposed to interact with the cauldron in any way. She like can't get too close and like alert the cauldron to her presence. And then Nesta pauses. And in that moment, Feyre remembers that her sister still can't use a bathtub. She's remembering like how she's asking her sister to re-traumatize herself in a way, and she like sees the fear on her sister's face. And then Cassian, who also sees Nesta, and says, "Nothing can harm you here." He rises, even though like he was literally carried in here like a limp body. Like this is hard for him to do, but he stands up, as is like, "Sit back down." But Cassian brushes him aside. He walks over to Nesta and he places a hand on her back, and he says it again, "Nothing can harm you here." Nesta is looking up at him as she closes her eyes and holds the stones in her hands, the stones and bones, and says, "I don't see anything." And Amren says, "Go deeper. Find that tether between you." She starts to stiffen, and then Cassian steps a little bit closer to her, and she settles. And then Nesta starts to like pant through her teeth, and Cassian's like, "Ness," and Amren says, "Quiet." Nesta whimpers, and Amren says, "Where is it, girl? Open your hand. Let us see." Feyre knows that Nesta has gone in too deep, so she goes into Nesta's mind. If Elain's mental gates were those of a sleeping garden, Nesta's, they belonged to an ancient fortress, sharp and brutal, the sort I imagined that once impaled people upon. But they were wide open, and inside, dark like I had never known, even with Rhysand. Nesta. I took a step into her mind. The images slammed into me, one after one. I saw them. The army that stretched into the horizon, the weapons, the hate, the sheer size. I saw the king standing over a map in a war tent, flanked by Jurian and several commanders, the Cauldron squatting in the center of the room behind them. And there was Nesta, standing in that tent, watching the king, the Cauldron, frozen in place with undiluted fear. Nesta. She did not seem to hear me as she stared at them. I reached for her hand. "You found it. I see where it is." Nesta's face was bloodless, but she at last dragged her attention to me. Feyre, surprise, lit her terror-wide eyes. "Let's go back," I said. She nodded, and we turned, but we felt it. We both did. Not the king or the commanders plotting with him, not Jurian as he placed his deadly game of deception, but the Cauldron. As if some great sleeping beast opened an eye, the Cauldron seemed to sense us watching. Sense us there. I felt it stir. Like it would lunge for Nesta. I grabbed my sister and ran. And as they're like running, Feyre is yelling for Nesta to release the stones for fear that like the Cauldron is going to follow them back to where they are. And Nesta does. She tosses the stones and bones, and it lands on a map in like a circle, like a perfect circle around this place that is less than 100 miles from their family's estate along the wall on, I believe it's on the wall that separates the human lands, which is not there anymore. So we know where Hybern's army is, and they're very close to human lands. Rhys brings Tarquin and Elain in to update them on what they know about Hybern's army, and they simply just do not have enough men to take on Hybern's forces. Like Feyre and Nesta saw how vast that force was. Like they're going to be overwhelmed. Even with Callus's they won't have enough. And he's going to drive them north. Right now, what looks like it's going to happen is Hybern is going to drive their forces up north until they're in the middle, that area that is governed by no court, and then they'll get eaten up by monsters. And that's like densely treed and like would be really easy to pick them off. They don't have time to find Miriam and Draken. They have like literal days. And Tarquin says, "Okay, well, we'll rest on it. Meet at dawn tomorrow. Make a decision after a long day never helped anyone. We will find a way to face this." And then as the meeting is wrapping up, Varian strolls into the tent, heads straight for Amren, drops to his knees in front of her, and kisses her square in the mouth. The Varian Amren romance is delightful. We only get little tastes of it in the side of things because Amren would never put her business on blast like that, but I love it every time. Amren is then literally carried out of the tent by Varian, legs wrapped around his waist, and Tarquin says, "We'll alternate who has to deal with him on holidays." Hilarious. Nesta is looking like ill. Like she's looking ill. Like that definitely took a toll on her, that little walk. And Cassian asks her, "Do you need to eat or do you need to go to bed?" And Nesta says bed. And it's clearly not an invitation, but like just like a sign of how exhausted she is. Feyre eats dinner with Rhysand and discusses what she had seen when she went with Nesta to the Cauldron, and then they head to bed together. In the morning, she plans to talk to Amren about Bryaxis and hopefully to get Amren to come with her to release Bryaxis from the library. And that night when she dreams of terrible things. My dreams were a tangled garden, thorns snagging on me as I stumbled through them. I dreamed of the Suriel, bleeding out and smiling. I dreamed of the weaver's open mouth ripping into Ianthe while she still screamed. I dreamed of Lord Graysen, so mortal and young, standing at the edge of the camp, beckoning to Elain, telling her he'd come for her, to come home with him, that he'd found a way to undo what had been done to her, to make her human again. And then she feels a tendril of something ancient and dark reaching towards her. It wakes her, and she wakes up Rhys immediately, and she tells him something is here, something is wrong. I dreamed about the cauldron, and I think that it was watching again. I think we opened a door, and Favor's on her feet, knowing she needs to find Nesta, but Nesta is right outside her tent. As soon as she leaves the tent, Nesta is there, and Amren also appears, popping out of Varian's tent. She's wearing Varian's shirt, and Amren says, "It came here. Its power, I can feel it, slithering around, looking. We pried too deep. Battle aside. It knows where we are as much as we now know its location." And then Nesta says, "Listen." And only Nesta, Feyre, and Amren can hear as the cauldron starts singing this siren song. They can hear it, but it seems like it's leaving. It's moving away from camp. And Az even comments that he can't hear it, but his shadows seem to be reacting to it, hiding from it. And then it goes silent. It has left. And Amren says, "Okay, well, Hybern knows where we are now. The cauldron likely wanted to have a look for itself after we taunted it." And Feyre's let's hope that that's the last we see of it. And Varian says, "So you three, because you were made, you can hear it, sense it?" And Amren says, "It would appear so." And then Az says, "What of Elain?" And Nesta just starts sprinting towards Elain's tent. But Elain's tent is completely empty. Her sheets are still warm. And Cassian starts barking orders. And Nesta's sprinting towards where they had heard that cauldron singing that song. It had lured Elain away with Graysen, that vision of Graysen that Feyre had seen in her dreams. And Nesta's standing at the trees at the edge of camp. And she lets out a sob as Rhys emerges from the forest, holding Elain's dark blue cloak. They took Elain! No way! Nesta's sitting inside Feyre's tent, head in her hands, and Feyre thinks to herself, Nesta had stolen something vital from the cauldron, and in those moments, Nesta had hunted it down for us. The cauldron had learned what was vital to her, so the cauldron had stolen something back in return. Cassian says to Nesta, "We'll get her back." And Nesta says, "No, you will not. I saw that army, its size, who's in it. I saw it, and there is no chance of any of you getting into its heart. Even you, especially not when you're injured." And Azriel says, "I'm going to get her back." And Nesta says, "Then you will die." And Az says again, "I'm getting her back." Okay. And we're supposed to believe that this girl is going to end up in Lucian? I don't know. And Feyre's thinking about those paints that Elain had once bought her when they were poor and had no money, and Elain had taken just the little bit of spending money that she had, and she had used it to buy her sister paints. And Feyre says, "I'm going with you." And Cassian says, "You will never get far enough into that camp to get her back." And Feyre says, "I'm going to walk right in." And then she shifts into Ianthe. And Nesta's they might already know she's dead. And they might, there's a risk that they're running, but Feyre feels confident enough that it was recent enough that maybe they don't know for sure yet, that maybe not everyone knows. And she asks Az for one of his siphons. It's close enough to the color blue of the jewel that Amarantha would wear on her little crown thing. And she has the blacksmiths make a little crown. She gives them some candlesticks. Why do they have silver candlesticks with them in war camp times? I don't know, but they do. They take them to the camp blacksmith, and she makes her a little circlet, and she borrows robes from the camp priestess. Rhys can't come with her because they would be able to sense his power. And so Rhys instead warns her as she's getting ready to leave. "There are wards around the camp. You cannot winnow. You have to walk in and out. And then you can make the jump back here. Ianthe sold out your sisters. It is only fitting that you use her to get Elain back. Do not get distracted. Do not linger. You are a warrior, and warriors know when to pick their fights. They took what is ours, and we do not allow those crimes to go unpunished. You do not fear. You do not falter. You do not yield. You go in, you get her, and you come out again. Remember that you are a wolf, and you cannot be caged." Obsessed? Did I tear up the first time I read this? Yeah, obviously. If you say the words, "you do not yield," I will be crying. You can find me crying anytime those words are spoken. I'm driving around, I see a yield sign, and I get a little choked up in my chest. Not really, but I wouldn't put it past me. And then Rhys turns to Azriel and says, "You get them in and out again, Shadowsinger. I don't care how many of them you have to kill to do it. They both come out." And Azriel gave a grave, steady nod. "I swear it, High Lord." And Feyre comments that they like both use their formal titles because this is like serious. They're like not joking around. And then Azriel winnows him and Feyre as Ianthe into Hybern's camp. Azriel like turns into shadow. He like disappears as Feyre starts to walk right into the heart of Hybern's camp. The first test is just to get past the guards. First test is just getting past the guards to see if they know if Ianthe is there or not. Feyre can feel Azriel moving through the shadows behind her as she approaches the camp entrance. The guards don't stop her, don't even look at her twice. They don't look confused, they don't mention anything, and she walks right past them. It is very hellish within the camp, where kind of explained. And Feyre is kind of like horrified at the thought of her sister being in there somewhere. She can like hear screams and debauchery all around her. Most of the soldiers are dancing around the fire, celebrating something. And they all have drinks from Tamlin's stores. And she hears a scream, and the scream like activates something in her, and it makes her want to run. But she knows that Ianthe would not run from that scream. And the scream isn't Elain, but instead one of the children of the Blessed, who has been hung on a rack. And there are 2 bodies on either side of her that have already died. But this young woman who has held on a little bit longer. And she obviously immediately thinks of Claire Petter, who had to endure similar treatment. And Feyre knows she wouldn't be able to live with herself if she just let that girl there in order to save her sister. She is like, okay, we got to get both of them out. Jurian comes up to her and he's like, hey, he's been looking for you, pointing to the King of Hybern. And Ianthe says, I've been busy with my sisters. And for some reason, Jurian like clocks that this is Feyre. I'm not entirely sure why he like is able to figure it out, but he does. Then Feyre, realizing that he's realized who she is, goes, where is she? And Jurian says, safe and untouched, not for long. It gave him a shock when she appeared before the cauldron. He had her contained, came here to brood over what to do with her, and how to make you pay for it. And then Jurian asks if Feyre had killed Ianthe, because like obviously having double trouble Ianthe around camp would be bad. And Feyre confirms, like, yeah, don't even worry. There's only one Ianthe in this town, and it's me. And then Feyre asks, like, again, where is my sister? Jurian explains she's in his tent, chained with steel and a little spell from his favorite book. Come to my tent with me, Ianthe, and let me see what that pretty mouth can do. That second part obviously being kind of a way to said loud enough so the guards around them can hear. And Feyre says, what of the girl on the rack? And Jurian says, there have been many before her and many will come after. And Feyre says, I cannot just leave her here. And Jurian says, you have a choice. You can either get your sister out or you can get her out. You will not be able to get both of them out. And Feyre says, if you get her to me, I will make it happen. Like, I can get them both out if you can get that girl to me. And Jurian says, okay, say you would like to pray before the cauldron before we retire. And she says as much and is let into the king's tent where the cauldron is. And Jurian is like, you've got literally 5 minutes to get her out. I will make a diversion, so like don't panic if you hear screaming. And then he's gone. Feyre starts praying, saying the prayers that she remembers Ianthe saying, while her and Az are busy trying to free Elain from the tent. And Azriel says to Elain, who's chained up in the corner, are you hurt? And Elain just says, you came for me. And Feyre's like, okay, hurry up, we have like no time. They're trying to figure out how to get her out of these magical chains, and they like can't. And Feyre's like, we don't have time, he's coming. But luckily she's like not chained to anything. I don't know. Az is able to like carry her even though she's like still got the chains on her. I guess she's not chained to things, she's just like chained, the handcuffed or whatever. And so Azriel is carrying Elain, and he's like, okay, be quiet, don't say anything. They need to sprint for the woods, and if Jurian's not there with the girl, Az like, I'm gonna have you winnow back with Elain, and I will go get her, okay, Feyre? But they're still running, and Az has made them shadow bound, which is like a sort of invisibility in which they're both like melting into the shadows, but he can't hold it for long because it's a lot of magic. And so he's urging them to move faster and faster as they start to hear howls pierce the night, and they've got these Naga dogs coming and following them, trying to eat them up. And they're shooting, then like the guards are shooting arrows at them. Az's shields are still holding, but they're rippling. They're like not gonna be able to hold for long. They get herded towards this cliff. Jurian isn't there, but the girl is right there. And she's huddled under a cloak, and the king speaks. What intrepid thieves, how shall I punish you? They are going to need to jump off this cliff to get past the wards and then winnow. And she tells Azriel to take her sister so Feyre can like take the human girl. And Azriel tries to like argue that that's like not the plan, but Feyre's like, that's an order. And Feyre gets shot with an ash arrow, and she hits the ground, and one of the Naga dogs is on her like immediately. The king is coming for her, and he says to her, torturing you would be so dull, at least the traditional sort of torture. How Rhys shall rage, how he shall panic, his mate at last come to see me. The dogs are like coming from her. They're going to be at her at any second. But then there's a familiar roar, and it's Tamlin in his beast form, and he rips into the hounds, and the hounds like go jump for him instead. The king looks shocked. I don't think the king expected Tamlin to choose Feyre over him. And Feyre's like, okay, she is like seconds now. She needs to get out of there. And Asriel's like, you need to fly. Can you make it? Behind them, Tamlin is surrounded by like 6 of the Naga dogs. Asriel has Elain in one arm and the girl in his other, so he's holding two girls. And Feyre decides that like, yeah, she's gonna make it. She's gonna figure it out. Like she has no choice but to become airborne for long enough to get through those wards. And Tamlin lets out a yelp of what sounds like pain, followed by another earth-shuddering roar. The rest of the hounds had reached him. He did not falter. He did not yield an inch to them. I love that line because that's what Rhys had ordered her not to do. You do not falter. You do not fear. You do not yield. And Tamlin is doing that. It's like such a good moment. I feel like for Tamlin, this is in many ways like his main moment. Threat of glass spoiler. But yeah, this like moment in which he like redeems himself through this action. I think it's sweet. I think it's really nice. Feyre is summoning her wings. Meanwhile, Elain is yelling at the girl waiting on the ground, telling her to hold on to Asriel. She's like, hold on. If you want to live, do it now. As practically like, tackles the girl as he like leaps off this cliff. And Elain is holding her by the neck, we're told. I assume just like this. A dog leaps for them. Elain kicks it in the face, barefoot. She's in her nightgown. Elain, we love this for you. And then blood sprays from Asriel's wings. He gets shot in the wing with a ash arrow, but he just continues flying. And Feyre needs to fly because she has seconds. The dogs are coming for her. Asriel is trying to like coach her through it as he's flying away. They're shooting arrows at them. Asriel is like shifting his body to keep them from hitting Elain. And then Feyre rips a hole in the wards and they are able to fly through it. Tamlin is still surrounded by these Naga dogs and he is bleeding pretty badly in his beast form, but then he follows them, leaping through that hole in the wards far and wide, farther than should have been possible, and he winnows away. They land back at camp. Asriel's power gives out. He collapses to the ground as soon as they land. He has Elain cradled to his chest. He's dripping blood from his wings. The girlie they rescued offers scraps of her clothing for the wounds. It's so sweet. We learn her name's Briar, and Briar is like, do you want some of my shirt to bind up your wing? We love Briar. The men saying, we never find out what happens to Miss Briar, but I hope she lives a gorgeous, happy life in Wintercourt. The men see Asriel as they walk into camp and they call for the healer. Rhys is there looking over all of them. And Feyre says to her husband, like, I couldn't leave her. And Nesta comes running and just sobs at the sight of Elain. And Feyre tells her mentally, like, she isn't hurt. She, like, can't form the words out loud, but she, like, tells her sister mentally. And Nesta's running for Feyre. She runs to Feyre instead of Elain and reaches her even before Rhys does and hugs her and says, thank you. And then Az is like, we need Helion to get these chains off of Elain. And Elain kisses Asriel on the cheek. And then Elain walks over to her sister and hugs Feyre. And then Feyre is crying. They're all crying. The healer patches Feyre up. And then Rhysand gives her a bath. Nesta's hovering over Elain as Helion removes her chains. And then we get this moment, which is my favorite moment in the entire book, is this one right here. But I did remember lying down on that bearskin rug once it was done. How I felt Elaine's slim body next to mine and curled into my side, careful not to touch the bandage wound in my shoulder. I had not realized how cold I was until her warmth seeped into me. A moment later, another warm body nestled on my left. Nesta's scent drifted over me. Fire and steel and unbending will. Distantly, I heard Rhys usher everyone out to join him on checking on Asriel, now under Thessian's care. I didn't know how long my sisters and I laid there together, just as we had once shared that carved bed in the dilapidated cottage. Back then, we'd kicked and twisted and fought for any bit of space, any breathing room. But that morning, as the sun rose over the world, we held tight and did not let go. I'm obsessed with it. I think this is so sweet. This is a book about sisters, as I have said 100,000 times. And for me, this moment is like so important. It is the thesis statement of the book. That like they're able to like hold on to each other instead of being forced to share a bed. They like choose to in this moment. To like cling to each other. It's my favorite. I love it so much. There's some really beautiful fan art of it. And I just I think it's the most beautiful moment in the entire book. Okay. Let's keep battling. Callus and his army arrived the next day, and Feyre is thinking a lot about Tamlin and how clearly Tamlin had gone back to Hybern after the meeting, not as a betrayal, but as a spy. and he had saved her. He had saved her at the end of the day. And Feyre's not sure where he would go after he where he went out away to after he leapt through those wards. They hadn't heard anything about the Spring Court forces. We don't know where they are. The Nephili and philosophy indeed. The weakness that had transformed into a strength hadn't been my wings, my flying, but Tamlin. Elain and Nesta are still sleeping when Feyre gets up, and she looks at how, like, terrible she looks in the mirror. And Feyre does not even know how Azriel managed to stay in the air with how badly he was injured with that, like, bolt that went through his wing. And Feyre goes and she gets breakfast for her sisters. I quietly asked the nearest camp mother to dig up some platters of food for my sisters. Elain was likely starving, and I doubted Nesta had eaten anything during the hours we had been gone. The winged matron only asked if I needed anything, and when I told her I was fine, she just clicked her tongue and said she'd make sure food found its way to me too. I, like, love this moment. I think it is so, it's so sweet. It speaks so much to, like, Feyre's role in this family and how she's just, like, always seen herself as someone who, like, makes sure her sisters eat. At the end of the day, like, that is one of the things that she, like, finds most important, is, like, making sure her sisters eat. And, like, we love at this moment she is reminded that, like, she needs to eat too. And, like, someone has to be like, no, girl, you need a meal too. Did anyone else cry over the fact that Feyre got her sister's breakfast? I don't know. That might just have been me. Feyre is headed towards Amren's tent when she sees Callus's troops arriving. Wintercourt's army is very, like, aesthetic and cute, okay? It also includes these, like, white foxes that carry messages. I also feel like at some point we learn that they, like, have polar bears that work for them. I'm obsessed. And then she sees Briar being taken by Vivian, and then Feyre sees Mor, and the last time that Mor and Feyre had talked, they had, like, fought. And so Feyre's not sure where they stand. And so she walks over to Mor and she says, you gave Briar over to them. And Mor says, Azriel explained the state you found her in. I didn't think being exposed to battle-ready Illyrians would do much to soothe her. And Feyre says, and the Winter Court's army is much better. And Mor shrugs and is like, they've got fuzzy animals. And then she says, you did a very brave thing in saving Briar. Feyre's like, I'm sure anyone would have done it. No, she said, adjusting her too tight Illyrian jacket. I'm not sure. I'm not sure even I would have tried to get her. I would have deemed the risk worth it. I've made enough calls like that where it went badly that and she just shakes her head, and then she gives Feyre an update on Azriel. He'll be fine, but his healing is going quite slowly because Thessian isn't used to healing Illyrians, and especially their wings, and so he is probably not going to be ready for battle anytime soon. He won't be able to fly soon, but, like, eventually he will be fine. Mor says to her, it would have been so easy for things to have gone wrong last night, and when I saw you two vanish, I had this thought, this terror that I might not get to see you again to make things right. And then Mor and Feyre agree that there should be no more lies between them, and then we get, like, a long confession from Mor. Mor confesses that she doesn't love Azriel, hasn't loved Azriel. Like, she loves him as family, loves him like a brother, but she can't love him romantically because she prefers females. Mor is... she goes on to explain that, like, she's known since she was a child that she, like, loves women. But in the Hewn City, all of that they care about is, like, breeding and bloodlines. And so if she would have married a woman, it would have been the end of her bloodline. And she would have been hated and deemed selfish to not continue that. Her betrothal to Eris, like, really, like, firmed this up for her. And, like, scared her because it wasn't just the prospect of a marriage to him that was, like, scary to Mor, but she says to Feyre, no, I knew I could survive his brutality, his cruelty, and his coldness. I am stronger than him. It was the idea of being bred like a prize mare, of being forced to give up that one part of me. I slept with Cassian because I knew it would mean little to him, too, because I knew that doing it would buy me a shot at freedom. If I had told my parents that I preferred females, you've met my father, he and Baron would have tied me to that marriage bed for Eris, literally. But sullied, I knew my shot at freedom laid there. And she goes on to say that, like, she didn't sleep with Az because she knew that Az would take it as something much more serious than it was. And so she slept with Cassian, and it, like, kind of wrecked Az. It made Az feel like he was just, like, not worthy of Mor. And Az had tried to confess his feelings to her when they had found her with that note nailed to her womb. And Mor just, like, left. She, like, could not face the truth in that moment, which, like, fair. She does have, like, she just was, like, brutally beaten and has something nailed into her stomach, like, not the mom as, but we've had a few years since then. And Mor goes on to say, I've slept with males in part because I enjoy it, but also to keep people from looking too closely. And Feyre's like, Rhys wouldn't care. I don't think anyone in Velaris would. And I'm like, that no one in the whole city. Okay. If you say so. Your perfect little city has not a single bad, mean person. Okay. Mor goes on. Velaris is a haven for people like me. Rita's, the owner's, is like me. A lot of us go there without anyone really picking up on it. It didn't matter much when my family disowned me, when they called me a whore and a piece of trash, when they hurt me, because those things, they weren't a part of me. They weren't true, weren't intrinsic. They couldn't break me because they had never touched the most inner part of me. They never guessed. But I've hid it. I've hidden it because She tilted her head back, looking skyward. Because I live in terror of my family finding out and shaming me, hurting me about this one thing that has remained wholly mine. This one part of me. I won't let them. Won't let them destroy it or try to. So I've rarely, during the war, I finally took my first female lover. And Mor talks about this first female relationship during the war was with one of the human queens named Andromacha. Okay. But she was human and a queen who needed to continue her royal line, especially during such a tumultuous time. So I left. I went home after the last battle. And when I realized what a mistake it was, that I didn't care if I only had 60 more years with her, the wall went up that day. And I was not allowed or able to cross it. I tried for 3 years, tried over and over. By the time I managed to find a hole, she had married a man and had an infant daughter with another on the way. I didn't set foot inside her castle, didn't even try to see her. I just turned around and went home. She bore 5 children. Died an old woman, safe in her bed, and I saw her spirit again in that golden queen, her descendant. Oh my gosh. As Mor's #1 hater, I am still crying about this, because it's sad, okay? I can have empathy for the blonde woman, even if she's mean to Nesta. Also, I am thinking about Astrid. But ever since then, she hasn't been open to having, like, another relationship. She's, like, taken female and male lovers, but, like, a lot of the male lovers had just been to, like, put a distance between her and Azriel. She loves him enough to want him to find someone who can truly love him the way she cannot and the way he deserves. And she says, and I love myself enough to not want to settle until I find that person too, if I can even work up the courage to tell the world first. My gift is truth, and yet I have been living a lie my entire existence. And Feyre promises that she won't say anything to anyone, even Rhys. And then they talk a little bit about whether she should tell Az. I mean, like, obviously she should tell Az, but, like, what her timeline on that is going to be. And Feyre says to her, whenever you are ready, I'll have your back. Meanwhile, Amren has kind of, like, locked herself up in a tent, won't let anyone inside, including Varian. Feyre tries, but even Elain can't break the words that Amren has put around her tent. Feyre is like, man, I really was hoping to, like, talk to her because I would really like her to come with me when we go get Bryaxis, mostly because she's scared to face the, like, monster alone. But Amren is working too hard on the Book of Breathings. Then we have a meeting in the war tent with all the High Lords because Helion scouts say Hybern is on the move. Azriel confirms this. His wings are still bandaged up. The army is being marched straight east. Tarquin suggests that maybe Hybern is going to meet an ally, like maybe the Human Queens. And Az is like, no, he sent the Human Queens home. Their armies aren't even raised yet, so I don't think that's who he's meeting. And Callus is like, perhaps he's leading us on another chase. And Mor says that's not his style. He'll want to try another way. Kira is in the tent too as one of the, like, commanders, and Mor barely, like, glances at him. They, like, really don't acknowledge each other much. And then Helion says Hybern is delaying the conflict. Why? And Feyre says he still doesn't have that missing piece of the Cauldron's power. Her sisters. And Rhys is talking to Cassian about how best to head south towards the human lands and how they would need to take the long way to avoid, like, this huge river, or would need to winnow to get around. And so if Hybern heads to the human lands now, he'd be able to enter the human lands without much resistance. And Callus says he could have done that from the start. Why now? And Nesta says because we have insulted him, me and my sisters. And Elain says he's going to march on the human lands to butcher them despite us. And Feyre says I killed his priestess. You took from his cauldron, she says to Nesta. And you, looking over at Elain, stealing you back was the final insult. And Callus says, only a madman would wield the might of his army just to get revenge on 3 women. And Helion snorted, you forget that some of us fought in that war. We know firsthand how unhinged he can be, and that something like this would be exactly his style. And Rhys says he'll know will come. He'll have seen us prioritizing of Elain's safety as proof that the Archeron sisters hold sway here. He thinks that they'll convince us to haul our asses down there, likely to a battlefield with few advantages, and be annihilated. And Tarquin says, so we're not going? And Rhys says, of course we're going. We will be outnumbered and exhausted, and it will not end well, but this has nothing to do with my mate or her sisters. The wall is down, it is gone, it is a new world, and we must decide how we are to end this old one and begin it anew. We must decide if we will begin it by allowing those who cannot defend themselves to be slaughtered. If that is the sort of people we are, not as individual courts, we as a Fae people, do we let the humans stand alone? And Helion says, we will die together then. And then Cassian says, good. He looks over at Nesta. If I end my life defending those who need it most, then I will consider it a death well spent. And Tarquin says, so will I. And then Callus looks to Vivian, who, me just, like, crying for the rest of this. Okay. Callus looks over to Vivian, who's just, like, smiling at him. They're both so sad. Feyre Feyre says, I could see the regret there for the time they had lost, but Callus said, we need to leave by tomorrow if we are to stand a chance against staunching the slaughter. And Helian's like, we can't even wait till tomorrow. We need to leave as soon as possible. Humans will be killed before we can even get there. And Feyre says, not if we act faster. Tonight, we winnow those of us who can to human homes, towns that are in the path, and we winnow out as many of them as we can before dawn. And Helios says, where will we put them? And Feyre says, Velaris. And Rhys says, Velaris is actually so far away, that's a bad idea. And Tarquin says, bring them to Adriata. I will see Cressida back to let her oversee them. And Callus says, we will need all the strength we have to fight Hybern, wasting and unwinnowing humans. And Feyre says, it is no waste. One life may change the world. Where would you all be if someone had deemed my life to be a waste of time? If Rhys had deemed saving my life under the mountain as a waste of time, even if it's only 20 families or 10, they are not a waste. Not to me or to you. And then Amren walks in and she says, I hope you all voted to face Hybern in battle. And Rhys says, we did. Why? And Amren says, because we will need a distraction. She smiled at me. We need to get to the Cauldron girl. We need to get to the Cauldron girl, all of us. And I knew she didn't mean the High Lords, but rather the 4 of us who had been made. Me, Amren, and my sisters. You found another way to stop it, Tarquin asked. Amren's sharp chin bobbed in a nod. Even better, I found a way to stop his entire army. So essentially the plan is if the 4 of them can touch the cauldron, they should be able to withstand the cauldron's power and nullify it. And then, or actually they want to harness the power and turn it against Hybern's army. Rather than nullifying the cauldron, they would nullify the person controlling it and his entire host. They would sneak to the cauldron in the middle of the battle while everyone is distracted. The only issue with this is if the king is obviously using the cauldron during the battle, which he very well might. That night, anyone who could win out did and went to the human villages along the path and pulled out as many as they could. They went house to house, winning families to safely, not even giving them a choice. Some people were like, no, I don't want to go. And Rhys said, too bad, so sad, come with us. Until they're exhausted and they land in bed to get a few hours of sleep before the battle should begin. And Feyre's just laying in bed watching Rhysand sleep, and she realizes that she would do anything to buy them, even the slightest chance of survival. She's going to go get the Ouroboros Mirror and Bryaxis because Amren just needs her physical body there. If she goes crazy, that's fine. As long as her body can show up at the cauldron, that's all Amren needs. She thinks to herself, looking at her husband. He had given enough, and if this broke me, drove me mad, ripped me apart, all Amren would need was my presence, my body, tomorrow at the cauldron. Anything else, if it was what I had to give, my own cost to buy them a sliver of survival, I would gladly pay it. Face it. And so Feyre winnows herself north to the Court of Nightmares, to the chamber where they keep the Ouroboros Mirror. She has to climb up this staircase, only 1,000 steps, so much shorter than House of Wind. Up at the top there will be the Ouroboros Mirror, and as she's climbing, she's thinking of what the Suriel said to her. Only you can decide what breaks you, Cursebreaker. Only you. It's snowing as she climbs these stairs. There's wind and moonlight coming in through the cracks in the wall. And then she reaches the chamber, snow crusting the surface of the mirror. And it's giant, taller than Feyre, with a bronze serpent that wraps around it as serving as the frame. And she looks in the mirror and only sees herself. She goes, hello? Hello? Is there anybody in there? And then she sees movement behind her, crawling down the snow-kissed wall, a massive beast of claws and scales and fur, shredding teeth inched towards the floor, towards me. Its enormous paws were near silent on the floor, the fur on them a blend of black and gold, not a beast designed to hunt in these mountains. Certainly not with a ridge of dark scales down its back, and its large, shining eyes. She spins around ready to fight it, but there's nothing there. And she turns back to the mirror. Gazing back at her is her reflection of what lurked beneath her skin. My knife clattered to the stones and snow, and I looked into the mirror. And then cut to her walking into the bone carver cell. And the bone carver says to her, no escort this time? And then Feyre summons the mirror right into the cell. Because now it's hers. It's hers to send wherever she wishes. And the bone carver says, you retrieved it. How? And Feyre says, I looked. Bone carver says, what did you see? That is none of your concern. You have your mirror. Now uphold your end. Battle awaits. And the bone carver says, that would be my pleasure. And Feyre says, what do you mean? What do you mean you're excited to do this? I thought you wanted this whole trade. And the bone carver says, I have a little need for that thing, but you did. I wanted to see if you were worth helping, the carver went on. It's a rare person to face who they truly are and not run from it, not be broken by it. That's what the Ouroboros shows all who look into it, who they are. Every despicable, unholy inch. Some gaze upon it and don't even realize that the horror they are seeing is them, even as the terror of it drives them mad. Some swagger in and are shattered by the small, sorry creature that they find inside. But you, yes, rare indeed. I could risk leaving here for nothing less. And Feyre says, good. and let's begin. By dawn, Feyre is back at the human lands at her family's home, which has been burnt to the ground and completely pillaged. They had cleared it the night before of their dogs and their livestock and of any servants and things, but all of their personal items are gone. Like, the house has been just, like, completely pillaged. But this is where they're kind of like meeting before the battle begins. Cassian's trying to figure out how to manage all the different armies and get them to work well together. Nesta and Feyre both have dressed for the battle. They're both in Illyrian fighting leathers. Nesta's in pants, and she's even got a knife strapped to her. Even though Cassian is like, you know, I like couldn't not give her a knife, but also like she's just as likely to hurt herself as she is someone else with it since she hasn't been trained. Vivian had given Elain a more modest option. She is wearing the winter court leathers, which are still pants, but are like much, they're for winter, so like they're much thicker. There's less skin showing. And Elain refuses the knife. But then Asriel comes up, and Asriel offers her truth teller. He says to her, I won't be using it today, so I want you to. It has never failed me once. Some people say it's magic. Will always strike true. It will serve you well. He's healed, but he won't be able to fly today, according to the healer, and ordered by Rhys. Rhys is like, you are not allowed to fly. And Mor, like, begs him with tears in her eyes, like, not to. And Elain is like, I don't know how to use a knife. I don't know how to use it. And Feyre says, I will make sure you don't have to. And then Rhys mentally tells Feyre, I have never once seen Asriel let another person touch that knife, because he's in love with her. Feyre's realizing now that like she spent her whole night either winnowing families and then going to the bone carver, and she would not get that like last night with him. She would not get to like spend this last night like sleeping next to her husband. And Rhys says to her, don't think like that. Don't go into this battle thinking you won't walk off again. And this is actually where I start sobbing my eyeballs out in this book. And I won't actually stop till the book is done. Like, I just cry for the rest. Amren walks over. It's time for the speeches. And Rhys says to them, do you want the inspiring talk or the bleak one? And Amren says, you want the real one. Okay, guys. Let me try to get through this. Rhys begins, I believe everything happens for a reason, whether it is decided by the mother or by the cauldron or some tapestry of fate. I don't know. I don't really care, but I am grateful for it, whatever it is. Grateful that it brought you all into my lives. That it brought all of you into my life. If it hadn't, I might have become as awful as that prick we're going to face today. If I had not met an Illyrian warrior in training, he said to Cassian, I would not have known the true depths of strength, of resilience, of honor, and loyalty. Cassian's eyes gleamed bright. Rhys said to Asriel, if I had not met a shadow singer, I would not have known that it is the family you make, not the one that you are born into, that matters. I would not have known what it is to truly hope, even when the world tells you to despair. If I had not met my cousin, I would have never learned that light can be found even in the darkest of hells, that kindness can thrive even amongst cruelty. Rhys bowed his head to Amren. If I had not met a tiny monster who hoards jewels more fiercely than a fire drake. A quiet laugh from all of us at that. Rhys smiled softly. My own power would have consumed me long ago. And if I had not met my mate, his words failed him as silver lined his eyes. He said down the bond, I would have waited 500 more years for you, 1,000 years. And if this was all the time that we were allowed to have, the wait was worth it. He wiped away the tears sliding down my face. I believed that everything happened exactly the way it had to, so I could find you. He kissed another tear away, and then he said to my sisters, we have not known each other for long, but I have to believe that you were brought here into our family for a reason too. And maybe today we'll find out why. Okay, that last one is not that kind. Could you have not found something nice to say? I have two favorite moments. I cannot choose between them. But this one, where he says, I would have waited 500 more years for you, 1,000, if this was, and it'd be worth it if this was all the time we were allowed to have. Yeah, it does make me cry. It is my favorite, one of my two favorites. Again, they're tied lines in this book. It's really good. What a bop of a line. And then they all hold hands in a circle. And Rhys continues, we will walk onto that field and only accept death when it comes to haul us away to the other world. We will fight for life, for survival, for all of our futures. But if it is decided by the tapestry of fate or the cauldron or the mother that we do not walk off that field today. His chin lifted. The great joy and honor of my life has been to know you, to call you my family. And I am grateful, more than I can possibly say, that I was given this time with you all. We are grateful, Rhysand, Amren says quietly, more than you know. Rhys gave her a small smile as the others murmured their agreement. He squeezed my hand again as he said, "Then let's go make Hybern very ungrateful to have known us too." They go to the battlefield. They're on this, like, grassy plain. They're on this hill that, like, overlooks this battlefield that is a grassy plain that stretches out to the sea. And Hybern's host is just waiting for them, and they know that they're vastly outnumbered. Cassian lands and notes that Hybern has taken all of the high ground, except the hill that they're standing on, apparently. Whatever. And Rhys says, "How long do you think we have?" And Cassian says, "We have 5 High Lords, and there is only one of him. You all could shield us for a while, but it might not be in our best interest to drain every one of you like that. He'll have shields too, and the Cauldron. He's been careful to not let us see the full extent of his power. I have no doubt that we are about to, though." And Rhys says, "You didn't answer my question." And Cassian says, "Let's say it goes badly. Shield shattered. Disarray. He uses the Cauldron. A few hours." Azrael's shadows have been hunting for the Cauldron, but the wards are strong, no doubt reinforced by the king. After you shredded through them at his camp, you might have to go on foot. Wait until the slaughter starts getting sloppy. And then Cassian says to Rhys, "On your command, I'll get the Illyrians into the skies. We advance on your signal after that." And Cassian turns to Nesta and, like, opens his mouth to say something, but in the end says nothing. Azrael offers to fight on foot because he can't fly yet, but he can still fight. But Rhys says no. And then Rhys mentally says to Feyre, "If Hybern has a lock on my power, he will sense me sneaking across the battlefield." So, like, he won't be able to come with her when she deals with the Cauldron. And then Rhys says to her, "Are you afraid?" And Feyre says, "Are you?" And Rhys says, "Yes. Not for myself, for all of you." And then Amren explains that magic will be first as they, like, both sides try to bring down the shields of the other sides. So all the High Lords except Rhysand release their magic. Rhys is saving his for later in the battle. Some of the shields falter on both sides, and we're just, like, standing up there. Amren is like, "I forgot how boring this part is." As the guys with magic just, like, kind of, like, are doing their magic things. Obsessed with Amren being bored by this. Rhys and Az are, like, looking over the field, and Az will be using his magic, even though he won't be physically fighting. He'll be, like, you know, shooting people down with his blue power. And then Feyre says to her husband, "I never got you a mating present, and I've been thinking about what to get you." I smiled at him, bathing in that power, and sent an image into his mind of the column of my spine, now inked from my base to my nape with 4 phases of the moon, and a small star in the middle of them. "But I'll admit," I said as his eyes flared, "this mating gift is probably for both of us, and it's a bargain tattoo." And Feyre gets rid of the glamour that she had put on the bone carver, who is now just a cloud of darkness on the front lines. And Rhys says, "You retrieved the Ouroboros Mirror." And Feyre says, "I did." And Rhysand says, "What did you see?" "Myself. I saw myself." Feyre responds, "It was perhaps the one thing I would never show him, anyone. How I had cowered and raged and wept, how I had vomited and screamed and clawed at the mirror, slammed my fists into it, and then curled up, trembling at every horrific and cruel and selfish thing I'd beheld within that monster, within me. But I kept watching. I did not turn from it, and when my shaking stopped, I studied it. All those wretched things, the pride and the hypocrisy and the shame, the rage and the cowardice and the hurt. And then I began to see other things, more important things, more vital. And what I saw," I said to him quietly as the carver raised a hand, I think I loved it, forgave it, me, all of it. It was only in that moment when I knew I'd understood what the Suriel had meant. Only I could allow the bad to break me. Only I could own it, embrace it. And when I had learned that, the Ouroboros had yielded to me." Rhysand arched a brow, even as awe crept across his face. "You loved all of it? The good and the bad?" And Feyre says, "Especially the bad." And Rhys reveals he had a little sneaky scheme of his own. It was not only Bryaxis and the Bone Carver on that battlefield, but also the Weaver, wearing Ianthe's pale jewel in the middle of her forehead. And Rhys says to her, "You are not the only one who can offer bargains, you know. I sent Helion to bargain on my behalf. That's why he was in the middle that day. He found you, to offer to break the containment spell on the Weaver in exchange for her services today." Then the Weaver, the Carver, and Bryaxis unleashed themselves upon Hybern. As they watch the monsters leave a trail of bodies in their wake, Rhys is just, like, pointing and misting, like, large chunks of Hybern's army, splitting the lines, and then Azrael is also doing the same, hitting them with more blasts. Then the Illyrians attack, but the Adder Legion meets them with arrows tipped with Fabane, cutting through all their shields. Tarquin, Helion, and Callus's soldiers charge on the ground. Feyre sends a little reminder to the Bone Carver and to Bryaxis not to eat their soldiers, and they do reluctantly listen. They agree not to eat their side. Elain is, like, cowering in the corner, covering her ears with her hands. She's not having a good time. Mor is down on the ground fighting. She can see, Feyre can see Cassian as his red siphon flares among the Darkbringers. And Amren's like, "It's already getting messy." And Rhys says, "Not yet." Amron wanting to go deal with the Cauldron. Not yet. Much of the army isn't engaged past the front lines. We need Hybern's focus elsewhere. And Amron says, this will be over before we can even walk down this hill. And Rhys goes, not yet. A horn sounded to the north. Both armies seem to pause to look. And Rhys says, okay, now, you have to go now. Because the army that broke over that northern horizon, 3 armies, one bearing the burnt orange flag of Baron, the other the grass green flag of the Spring Court, and one of mortal men in iron armor, bearing a cobalt flag with a striking badger. Graysen's crest. And then Eris appears and he says, we thought you might need some help. And then he explains that Tamlin had forced Baron to come. And that's where Tamlin had gone after he left Hybern. He went out to Autumn Court to force Baron to come help. Tamlin wants orders, Eris said. Jurian does too. Rhys's voice was rough, low. And what of your father? Eris, we're taking care of a problem. His brothers are lighting those wagons full of Faebane on fire, so they don't have to deal with those anymore. But now it is time for the maid girlies to go deal with the Cauldron. Amron grabs both other Archeron sisters and she says to them, now quick, quiet as shadows. Elain is a little shaken to see Graysen's coat of arms. But the Weaver is busy clearing a path to the Cauldron for them. That's what Rhys tasked her to do. Amron glamours them and they're about to head out onto the battlefield. And then Nesta gasps and stumbles. They're getting ready to use the Cauldron. They're not going to make it to the Cauldron in time. And Amron shouts, shields, shields, and Rhys tries to relay that as fast as possible while Nesta is busy heaving in the grass. Rhys shields their forces as best he can, and Nesta looks up and starts screaming because amongst the Illyrians in the sky is Cassian, and she starts shouting his name. Amron's trying to grab her, but Nesta pulls away and continues shouting as Cassian heads straight for them, Nesta moaning and writhing on the ground. Cassian is halfway there when the Cauldron blasts hit the Illyrian forces, and Feyre sees him scream as the Cauldron directly hits where Cassian been just a moment before. The blow shreds all of their shields, Az's and Rhys's and all the Siphon made ones. It burns against Feyre's face. It is so strong. Nesta had known. She had gaped up at me in terror, agony in her face, and then scanned the sky for Cassian, who flapped in place, as if torn between coming for us and charging back to the scattering Illyrian and Peregrine ranks. She had known where that blast was about to hit. Cassian had been right in the center of it, or would have been if she had not called him away. Rhys was looking at her like he knew too, like he didn't know whether to scold her for the guilt Cassian would no doubt feel, or thank her for saving him. Probably just thank her for saving him. What do you mean? Scold her? Be like, hey, don't pull Cassian away from his forces when he was about to get killed. Please. Nesta's body went stiff again, a low moan breaking from her. This time all the High Lords put their shields up, but the Cauldron hits a different spot, wiping out not only a chunk of their armies, but also Hybern's army. They don't care. But it does kill the Bone Carver. Oh. Not Boney. But the Carver, I could have sworn he looked towards me as the Cauldron's power crashed into him. Could have sworn he smiled, and it was not a hideous thing at all. There and gone. I love the Bone Carver. He's my guy. I'm sad that he dies in this. I miss him. Feyre is reeling in the wake of the Cauldron's power, wondering who will carve the Bone Carver's death into the prison. If perhaps he had already carved it for himself on the walls of that cell. If he had wanted to make sure that Feyre was worthy, not to taunt her, but because he wanted his end. He wanted his end to be one worth carving. It hits me right in the guts. Then the Illyrians are reforming the lines, and she can hear them charging again, and pulls her out of her head. Graysen's army does not falter, even as they go down one by one against these forces that are so much stronger than them. And Cassian lands next to Nesta, and Nesta says, it's gone quiet again. Cassian sits her up. She had been laying on the ground and is looking at her face. And Rhys says, get back in line. The soldiers need you there. Cassian bares his teeth at Rhys. What the hell can we do against them? And Azriel says, I'm going in. And Rhys goes, no. But Azriel was spreading his wings, the sunlight so stark on the new slashing scars down the membrane. Chain me to a tree, Rhys. Azriel said softly. Go ahead. He began checking the buckles on his weapons. I'll rip it out of the ground and fly with it on my damned back. Okay. Sorry, that's kind of hot. Okay. For sure. Feyre is freaking out because they need to get to the Cauldron before it's reloaded, but Nesta is not doing well. Elain is in the corner throwing it from terror. Nesta is passed out on the ground from feeling that Cauldron attack again. Amron and Feyre talk mentally about whether between the two of them it might be enough. And they're gonna try it. The other High Lords are holding the lines, but it would not be enough. They needed to move quickly. Their only chance is to get to that Cauldron and turn it towards their side. And then comes sailing out of the west, out of Hybern, Armada appeared. And they're Oh no, because now they're trapped between Hybern's armies. They've got the Armada coming on one side, and they've got Hybern's ground forces on the other. Like, now they're sandwiched between them. And Amren is like, we might need to run, Rhys, before they make landfall. We might, like, need to get as many people out of here as we can and just, like, flee. Rhys turned to Feyre. If you can't get across that battlefield in time, then do it. Try to stop the army of the king. But if you can't, when it all goes to hell, when there are none of us left, don't. I begged him. Don't say it, Rhys. Rhys says, I want you to run. I don't care what it costs. You run. Get far away and live to fight another day. You don't look back. I began to shake my head. Feyre says to him, you said no goodbyes. Then Rhys says to Azriel, like, to lead the northern flank, even though, like, he isn't healed. But they're, like, desperate. They're going to die. And so, like, they have to use everything they can, even if it's going to wind up hurting us. And Hybern is on the ground just cheering about the Armada arriving. Rhys tells Cassian to take the southern flank. And then Cassian says to Rhys, to Nesta, I'll see you on the other side. But then there are horns from the east. Thousands of flying soldiers coming straight from the armada of ships below, so many more than Hybern ships. It's Draken's legion. And Draken flies over to them and lands and says, you could have asked for aid, you know. Instead of letting us hear about all this through the rumor mill, seems like we arrived just in time. And Rhys says, we came looking for you and found you gone. But, like, he's crying. Makes it hard to ask for someone for aid. And Draken explains that they had set up a glamour to make their lands look abandoned, but clearly it worked too well. But they'd been there the whole time. And then Rhys asks about their armada. And he's like, are those your friends? Are those friends of yours? And Draken says, friends of yours. I think some of Mirian's boats are down there with them. But most of them came for you. And Nesta goes, what? And Draken says, we met up with them on the flight here, saw them crossing the channel, and decided to join their ranks. That's why we were a little late, though we gave them a bit of a push across. They're led by a queen named Vasa. Feyre's crying, which is good, because I'm at this point crying so hard that it feels like I swallowed, like, too much water when I was in the swimming pool. At this point in my notes, I was literally felt like I had been drowned, and then, like, someone had to do CPR when I got ashore. So much tears I was crying. Draken explains that it wasn't Lucian that found them. Lucian had joined them later. But urged them to join Prithian faster. He was like, we gotta go quickety quick, but they were already on their way. And Nesta says, who found Vasa? And Draken says, he calls himself the Prince of Merchants. Apparently, he discovered the human queens were traitors months ago, and he's been gathering an independent human army to face Hybern ever since. He managed to find Queen Vasa, and together they rallied this army. Draken shrugged. He told me that he's got 3 daughters who live here, and that he's failed them for many years, but he would not fail them this time. He named his 3 personal ships after them, and they are sailing at the front. I beheld the names of those ships, the Feyre, the Elain, and then leading the charge against Hybern, flying over the waves, unyielding, and without an ounce of fear, the Nesta, with my father, our father, at the helm. I just have to go take a minute. I had to go take a minute. I was crying a lot, and I needed to take a minute, because we have more tears coming. I needed to take a deep breath after these 3 ships were announced. Oh my gosh, with Nesta at the helm? No. The wind whipped away the tears rolling down Nesta's face at the sight of our father's ships, at the sight of the ship he'd chosen to sail into battle, for the daughter who had hated him for not fighting for us, who had hated him for our mother dying, for the poverty and the despair and the years lost, our father. Gone for months and months with no word. He had left, my sisters had once said, to attend a meeting regarding the threat above the wall. At that meeting, had it become clear that we had been betrayed by our own kind? Had he then departed, under such secrecy he would not risk the messages to us falling into the wrong hands to find help. For us. For me and my sisters. Meanwhile, we see Vasa flying. She's in Firebird form. She's flying over everyone as a Firebird, hot and furious as the heart of a forge, we hear. And she starts ripping into all of Hybern's ships, burning them up one by one, while the Armada starts taking on the others. And Rhys asks Draken to get his legion on land, because they need his help there. And then Rhys is like, hey, by the way, Jerain is here. He's on our side. So don't kill him, probably. Draken doesn't seem thrilled with this, because Draken and Jerain are not besties. And then Feyre's like, okay, Amren, we need to go now. And Nesta says, use me as bait to draw the king away. If he doesn't know how much I took, and if it makes it seem like I'm about to use his power, he'll come running just to kill me. And Cassian says, he will kill you. And Nesta says, that's where you come in. And Rhys says, no. And Nesta says, you are not my high lord. I may do as I wish. And since he'll sense that you're with me, you'll need to go far away too. And Rhys says to Cassian, I am not letting you throw your life away for this. And Cassian says, Az has control of the lines. And Rhys says, I said no. Cassian says, it is the only shot we have of a diversion, luring him away from that cauldron. You gave everything, Rhys. You went through all that hell for us for 50 years. You think I don't know what happened? I know, Rhys. We all do. And we know you did it to save us, to spare us. Let us return the favor. Let us repay the debt. And Rhys says, there is no debt to repay. Cassian says, okay then, I never got to repay your mother for her kindness. Let me do it this way. Let me buy you time. And Rhys says, I can't. Cassian says, you can. You can, Rhys. Save some of the glory for the rest of us. And Nesta says, Amren showed me enough what to do, how to rally the power to me. And Nesta looks down at Elain, her sister just staring out over the bloodbath in front of them. And then Nesta turns to Feyre and says, tell father thank you. And then Cassian picks her up and they fly away. And Rhys has to, physically restrain himself from flying after them. And Feyre says he might survive it. And Rhys says he won't. And then Feyre has Rhys move Elain as far away as possible. And then Rhys heads into battle. We have questions. This is never really answered. Elaine's going to show up in a minute. Where she's not supposed to be. How did she get from there to there? Can Elain winnow herself? I think signs point to yes. How the heck is she going to get from point A to point B? Rhys just flew her super far away. And then just literally a chapter, she's going to be right in the heart of it. Elain, I have some questions for you. Amren tells Feyre to shield them from sight and they start running. And Amren is like, don't stop and kill people on our way. It'll leave a trail and don't look back. The Weaver has cleared a super nice path for them to where the cauldron sits in a rocky overlook. Amren is shattering all the wards in their path, eating them up like little snacks. The hill has a bunch of Hybern's commanders waiting to fight the High Lords and Feyre's pals, and Feyre does have to restrain herself from fighting them. Feyre looks behind her to see Mor and Vivian and the Winter Court bearers fighting off a big group of Hybern soldiers. The cauldron beckons for them up the hill. The Weaver is waiting for them. She's planning to cause a little diversion for them to be able to get the last way. They need to hurry. Feyre can feel the cauldron gearing up to unleash itself again. And then she's like, wait, it's not actually the cauldron. It's Nesta. Nesta's gearing up to unleash herself. And Amren says, good girl. As the King of Hybern walks right past them, focused on the Weaver and Nesta's rising power. The king says to the Weaver, how beautiful you are, how magnificent, Ancient One. And Straiga, the Weaver, says, you may bow, King, as it was once done before. And the King of Hybern walks up to the Weaver and breaks her neck and then tosses her to his hounds, his Naga dogs. And then he starts walking towards Nesta. Feyre couldn't move. Cassian and Nesta, even Rhys, thought that there was no shot of survival. You make it count, Amren snapped. And that was true grief shining in her eyes. She doesn't think they're going to make it either. They reach the cauldron and Feyre thinks to herself, maybe if I move fast enough, maybe if we get this cauldron activated fast enough, I can save them. I can turn this cauldron before the king reaches Nesta. Amren tells her to place her hand on the cauldron, and then Amren watches her for a long moment as Feyre watches the cauldron, and she does not read from the Book of Breathings. Does not put the book in Feyre's hands. She shut the gold pages and shoved it behind her with a kick. Amren had lied. She did not plan to leash the king or his army with the cauldron and the book. Whatever trap she had set, I had fallen right into it. Guys, I remember reading this book for the first time and getting so scared that Amren was evil. Oh my gosh, this did scare the pants out of me. I was scared. She's not evil, don't worry. Feyre's trying to hold on to her senses of self as she also tries to hold on to the cauldron. And Amren says to her, I'm sorry I lied to you. But Feyre is kind of busy because she's currently being shredded by the cauldron's magic. She's trying to use her magic to fight against it, but it all fails her. And then she's vanished. She's vanished by the cauldron just mentally. The cauldron takes her on its hunt for Nesta. It searches the battlefield where Feyre kind of gets this bird's eye view of how badly they are losing. Rhys has shifted into his beast form, which is a creature that lived in black pits and only emerged at night to hunt and feast. Rhys does not like his beast form and rarely uses it, but he's brought it out for this battle. Helion looks like the golden version of Rhysand's beast, and they unleash themselves on Hybern. But the cauldron pulls them away again towards Nesta and her power that seemed to sing, come. Feyre arrives to Nesta just before the King of Hybern does, just in this cauldron form, so Nesta can't see Feyre. And Nesta says, get ready, he's coming. Cassian is ready. He's got his sword out, standing right next to her. Nesta is ready to kill the King of Hybern. She's I remember my death promise. I'm going to use this magic to kick his booty. I'm ready. She plans to make good on it. The King of Hybern winnows in front of them, but Nesta's power vanishes the moment the King of Hybern appears, because he's got Papa Archeron with a sword to his throat. That is why he had looked out to the sea. He'd known Nesta would land that killing blow the moment he appeared, and the only way to stop it, a human shield. One she would think twice about allowing to die. And Papa Archeron says, the moment he sees her, "Nesta." And the king says, "What a loving father to bring an entire army to save his daughters." And Feyre starts begging the Cauldron to save her father. She's like, "Please, anything." And the king is like, "So many things have changed since you were last home. 3 daughters, now Fae. One of them married quite well," Papa Archeron says. "I loved you from the first moment I held you in my arms. And I am so sorry, Nesta. My Nesta. I am so sorry for all of it." And Nesta just starts begging. She's, "Please, please. What will you give me, Nesta Archeron?" The King of Hybern says. And Cassian's trying to find some way to attack the king, but there's just like, no. There's no way he's going to be able to get past Papa Archeron to get to the king. And the king says, "Will you give back what you took?" And Nesta says, "Yes." And the king says, "Even if I have to carve it out of you." Papa Archeron says, "Don't you lay your filthy hands on my daughter." The King of Hybern snaps Papa Archeron's neck with an audible crack, and Feyre is screaming as she's trapped in the cauldron, begging it to bring their dad back, to do something. Nesta's power just vanishes. It flickers out, but Cassian attacks, locking a shield around Nesta as he goes to fight the King of Hybern. Cassian and Hybern are sword fighting, but with the king's magic, Cassian will not last long. But he's trying to buy Nesta a little time so she can get away. A little time for Feyre to finish what she started. And Nesta is just kneeling down in front of their father. She kisses his forehead. And then when she lifts her face, her eyes are burning with that silver power. As Cassian's bark of pain comes from the forest, Nesta rises to her feet, power shuddering around her. Cassian screams as his wings are snapped, blood leaking from them, a bone jutting out of his thigh, his siphons gone dull. The King of Hybern is standing above him and uses his magic to snap another bone as Cassian's body, as he writhes around on the ground. And then Nesta just says, "Stop." And the way she tilts her head is not human, not fae, but pure animal, predator. And Nesta says to the king, "I am going to kill you." And the king says, "Really? Because I can think of far more interesting things to do with you." The king stomps on Cassian's near swing, and Cassian's screaming again, and then Nesta explodes. The king winnows out of the way, but her power blasts the trees behind him to cinders, blasted across the battlefield in a low arc, and then landed right in the Hybern's ranks, taking out hundreds before they knew what happened. And the king goes, "Magnificent, barely trained, brash, but magnificent." And Nesta's trying to rally her power again, but she is not really good at metering it out and using it appropriately. Also, I don't think she's learned about how to tunnel down into your magic. No one has trained her really that well. Amren did her best, but I know a certain blonde lady who probably would have been more helpful, or a blonde man. The blondes from would have been helpful. And then Cassian's shouting for her to go, to leave him. And the king says, "This seems familiar. Was it him or the other bastard who crawled towards you that day?" Because Cassian is crawling towards her. And Nesta rushes to him, not to comfort him, but to pick up his Illyrian blade. Nesta lifts the blade as Cassian tries to stop her because, again, she's not trained. He's like, "Please." Oh my god, she's going to cut off her own foot. And the king says, "Shall I see what the Illyrians taught you?" And the king is upon her a moment later. The king is lunging for her, and Nesta is dodging, leading the king further away from Cassian. She's trying to pay Cassian time, and the king strikes her in the face, and she goes down hard. She falls to the ground, and Cassian is calling out her name, and he's again trying to crawl towards her. And the king says, "Well, what else do you have?" And then Nesta hits him with a strike of her power, one right after another that pushes him into the forest. But that's the last of her power. She is out now. And she kneels down in front of Cassian, and she says, "Okay, you have to get up. You have to get up." But he can't. He tries for her, but he just cannot bring himself to standing. And Nesta says, "You're too heavy. I can't carry you." And he's coming. And Cassian says to her, "Go." And Nesta says, "I can't." And then Cassian says to her, my other favorite line in this book, "I have no regrets in my life but this, that we did not have time, that I did not have time with you, Nesta." She did not stop him as he leaned up and kissed her lightly, as much as he could manage. Cassian said softly, brushing away the tear that streaked down her face, "I will find you again in the next world, the next life, and we will have that time. I promise." And even the Cauldron seemed to pause in surprise, or some feeling, as Nesta looked at that king with death twining around his hands, and then down at Cassian, and covered Cassian's body with her own. Cassian went still, and then his hand slid over her back. Together, they would go down together. And once again, I am sobbing. And Feyre says to the Cauldron, I will offer you a bargain. I will offer you my soul. Save them. Meanwhile, the king says, romantic but ill-advised. But Nesta did not move from where she shielded Cassian's body. And Feyre is begging the Cauldron for anything. Anything. And the king's hand began to drop, and then halted. A choking noise came out of him. For a moment, I thought the Cauldron had answered my pleas. But then, as a black blade broke through the king's throat, spraying blood, I realized someone else had. Elain stepped out of a shadow behind him and rammed Truth Teller to the hilt through the back of the king's neck as she snarled in his ear, Don't you touch my sister. Obsessed, obviously. Obsessed. Nesta jumps to her feet as she realizes what happened. She takes Truth Teller and she twists it deeper into the king's neck while Cassian just smiles and watches. Nesta cuts off the head of the king, like off of his shoulders, and lifts it up and is like holding it until Elain is like, Nesta? At the sound of her name from her sister, she drops the head, and the Cauldron realizes that Elain had defended this thief. Elain, who had gifted with such powers, found her so lovely and had wanted to give her something. It would not harm Elain, even to hunt to reclaim what it had taken. And then Elain sees their father's body, and she starts screaming. And the Feyre is whipped back across the battlefield, back to the Cauldron. She sees again the High Lords and Draken fighting. Hybern is overwhelming them, and Rhys roars, and Feyre realizes that he's fading. He's faltering. He needs help. Amren is yelling at her and, like, slapping her in the face. She's like, hello, we are busy. Why did you go on a freaking, like, what is it called when you leave your body? She went on a little field trip, and, like, honestly, they were kind of busy. And Feyre says, the king is dead, and you're going to be soon. And you're going to be too... What? You are going to be soon, too. Feyre is like, I'm going to kill you for betraying us. And Amren's like, okay, I know. And I need your help to do it. Don't break it. The contact. I need you to be a conduit. And she explains that the message from the Suriel was not to give her a spell of control, but was an unbinding spell for Amren. Feyre is going to be left to control the Cauldron, as Amren is going to turn back into a real form and wipe out literally all of them. She's like, I'm returning back into my natural form. Varian's here. Where did he come from? I don't know. But he's here and he's pleading with Amren. He's like, don't. And Amren's like a hound on a scent. And Varian is like, don't. And Amren ignores him and says to Feyre, unleash me. Let me end this. And Feyre says, you will be gone. You said you wouldn't remember us. Won't be you if you're freed. And Amren says, I watched them for so many eons, humans. In my world, there were humans too. And I watched them love and hate and wage senseless wars and find precious peace. Watch them build lives, build worlds. I was never allowed such things. Had not been designed that way. Had been ordered to do so. So I watched. And the day I came here, it was the first selfish thing I had done. For a long, long while, I thought it was a punishment for disobeying my father's orders. For wanting. I thought this world was some hell that he'd locked me into for disobedience. But I wonder if my father knew, if he saw how much I watched them love and hate and build and opened that rip in the world, not as a punishment, but as a gift. For it had been a gift, this time with you, with all of you. It has been a gift. And Varian is like, please, I am begging you. And Amren says, tell the High Lord to leave out a cup for me. And Feyre says, I will. And then Amren turns to Varian and says, I watched them most, the humans who loved. I never understood it. How it happened. Why it happened. I think I might have learned with you, though. Perhaps that was the last gift, too. And then Amren turns back to Feyre and spoke the words into her head. The spell I must do and think and feel. I nodded. When I am free, Amren said to us, do not run. It will attract my attention. She lifted a steady hand towards my arm. I am glad we met, Feyre. I smiled at her, bowing my head. Me too, Amren. Me too. And Feyre is, like, fighting to get through the spell with her arm in the cauldron as Amren is, like, swimming around inside, blowing bubbles into the water, just waiting. Then Amren vanishes into the dark water, and the cauldron splits into 3 pieces, and Amren explodes out of it, flaming and incandescent, but she looks back at them, like she remembers them. And then she descends on Hybern's armies. Rhys is on the ground shouting for his men not to run. He's like, don't run, it'll attract her attention. And she rips through the Hybern commanders on the ground, shattering them as if they were made of glass, but her power is fading. She heads out to sea, felling whole boats of men, even as her whole life sputters out of her. Amren reaches the final boat, the very last ship of their enemy, and there was no more than a flame on the breeze, and when that ship too fell silent, there was only light, bright, clean light, dancing on the waves. So that's the end of Amren. Varian is crying, looking out over the sea to where Amren has vanished. And below them on the ground, their armies are cheering with joy and victory because Amren wiped out Hybern. Feyre looks back at the broken cauldron and is getting ready to leave with Varian when she feels it. The thing in the cauldron, or the lack of it. A void is leaking into the world and it does not belong here. The cauldron is broken and it is taking its emptiness into the world. Then Rhys is with her, checking to see if Feyre's hurt and what happened with Amren, and he's shaking and he's barely standing, and Feyre lets him into her mind and shows him everything that had happened and how the cauldron is ending the world. And Rhys hugs her just for a moment, and Varian says, "We have a problem. The cauldron could never be destroyed, we had been warned, because our very world was bound to it. If the cauldron was destroyed, we would be true. But Feyre might be able to remake it because she is made." And so Feyre runs the book and she's trying to figure out how to read it. It's written in a language she doesn't understand, so it's not really helpful. Feyre's like, "I don't know what to do." And Rhys says, "Amren said you were a conduit, so be one again, remake the cauldron, forge it anew." Feyre says, "With what power we are all drained." And Rhys says, "Mine. Try. Humor me." Feyre says, "Okay, better than nothing." And Rhys smiled down at her, kissed her once. "Remind me to never get on Nesta's bad side." And Feyre is laughing with him as she lays her hand on the broken shards of the cauldron, and she's in the dark of the cauldron, this nothing that existed before the beginning of the world. And Rhys is her tether back to the world. She can feel him at her back. She remembers the story of the cauldron that had been a mural in the Spring Court Library and how all life had flowed from the cauldron. Rhys's power is flowing through her, and she thinks to herself, "I was not afraid. Not with him there." The power is pouring through her as she leans back against Rhys. They need more, and Rhys hands over everything. "I love you," he whispered into my mind. The cracks in the cauldron are healing, the first one, then the second. Rhys is trembling behind her, continuing to say, "I love you," into her mind. His power is sputtering out, but still flowing. Together they are mending everything. Every last drop they are giving to the cauldron until it is whole again. And then Feyre turns around, all the cracks mended, and finds Rhys sprawled out on the ground behind her, and she can't feel him down her bond. He's gone. He's died. And this does make me cry every time, even though he's dead for approximately one page, but it's really sad. And then Feyre is shaking his body and screaming his name, and then Mor is there, and Cassian is barely standing, but he's there, and they're talking, but Feyre can only hear that last "I love you" from Rhys. And he had known he had nothing left, and stopping it would take everything. It would cost him everything, and he'd kept his shields up so I wouldn't see. And then Cassian comes, and he's checking to see if there's anything that can be done. And Feyre is just begging anyone to do something. She doesn't know the spells, how to use the cauldron. And Tarquin just kneels down next to her and he says, "I'm sorry." "Stay with the High Lord," the Suriel's last warning. "Stay and live to see everything righted. A lie, as Rhys had lied to me. Stay with the High Lord, stay." And then she feels the last scraps of the mating bond, these little tendrils that are left, and she holds on to them. And Feyre turns to the High Lords and screams at them, "Bring him back. You did it for me. Now do it for him." And Helian's like, "You're human. It wasn't the same." And Feyre's like, "I don't care. Do it." Feyre's ready to use compulsion on them. She does not care. She was going to make these boys bring her husband back. Tarquin doesn't need to be compelled. He steps up first, and he has a little kernel of power, and he says, "For what he gave today and for many years before." He drops the little seed of light onto Rhys's throat, and the other High Lords come up one by one until only Baron is left, and Mor puts a sword to his throat and says, "I do not mind making one more kill today." And then Feyre is in charge of putting in that last spark. Thessian walks her through the process to give him a spark of life, and he doesn't awaken, and Feyre's like, "What?" And then, as if waiting for this moment, Tamlin walks in, covered in blood, and he looks over at Feyre and at Rhys, and Feyre says, "Please, I will give you anything." I don't know why we're not threatening him like Baron. Mor, put a knife to his throat. Tamlin's gonna give a little seed of power. Something shifted in Tamlin's eyes at that, but not kindness, no emotion at all. Feyre says, "Anything," again. Tamlin stood there, staring down at me, those green eyes swimming with some emotion I couldn't quite place. "Be happy, Feyre," he said quietly, and dropped that final kernel of light onto Rhys-Anne. Okay. Sorry, I feel like Tamlin already, he's been doing all good guy stuff this last part of the book. Was he, so rude in the meeting? Yeah, but, I've forgiven him. This doesn't, I don't know. I don't love the be happy moment. I'm like, okay, I was. What? Okay, I wasn't going to, but thanks for giving me the instruction. I don't like it. And maybe it's just because I don't like being told what to do. But I would take this as, hostilely. I don't like this. I don't like the vibes. I don't like the vibes Tamlin's giving off right now. Sorry, it's a little judgy because he is being helpful, but I'm like, okay, don't tell me what to do. But I had already forgiven him once he rescued her and her sister, so whatever. Feyre's begging Rhys to stay now, and through the scraps of their bond, she tells him the story of how she fell in love with him, starting in Calamine and going onward, and his heart starts beating, and she feels a hand brush against her back, and Rhys says, if we're all here, either things went very, very wrong, or very right, and then Cassian laughs, and Rhys says, you'll be pleased to know my power remains my own, no thieving here. And Elain says, you do know how to make an entrance, or should I say exit? And Vivian says, you're horrible, and not even remotely funny. And Rhys says, stay with the High Lord. It's real. And I have another surprise. Someone fish dear Amryn out before she catches a cold. And Varian is moving for the cauldron, but Mor beats him to it and pulls Amryn out of the pot. Essentially, Rhys and her just like carpooled out of the cauldron. He was like, I was leaving death through the cauldron. I saw Amryn hanging out, and I said, do you want to come back with me? And she said, yeah. And so I brought her with me. She is just high fae now. Her like magic monster powers are gone. She's just like a normal girl, high fae girl, but a girl nonetheless. Nesta, Elain, and Feyre go back to the clearing to bury their father. Rhys doesn't come with them. He like knows that they need this moment alone, and he has to go deal with like the aftermath of war. Cassian, meanwhile, is at the nearest healer. It's just the girls. Nesta spits on the King of Hybern's body as she walks by it. Slay on. Elain had washed his face and combed his hair and his beard and laid flowers on his head and his chest. He is like in like such a bloody day. He had died this like bloodless death. And Elain says to him, I love you. And Nesta doesn't say anything. And Elain says, should we say a prayer? And we learned the human lands really don't have prayers, which it's perplexing to me why Elain would suggest that then. They're like, don't have religion in the human lands, we're told. They kind of like abandoned that when the Fae and human lands separated, because like they were like, the Fae are so annoying and we're not going to take their religion. But like, why would she suggest praying if they don't have prayers? You know? What a weird choice, Elain. Okay, but then Feyre offers one. Mother hold you. May you pass through the gates. May you smell that immortal land of milk and honey. Fear no evil. Feel no pain. May you enter eternity. Elaine's crying, and she adjusts some of the flowers on their father's body, and then Feyre lights his body on fire, and he's ash within moments. Lucien arrives shortly after, and he goes to Elain, and he asks if she's hurt, and Elain says, I'm fine, are you? And Lucien says, well, I never want to fight another battle as long as I live, but yes, I'm in one piece. I heard what happened. I'm sorry for your loss, all of you. Feyre hugs him and thanks him for coming to help with their battle, and Lucien says, don't be surprised if Vasa corners you as soon as the ships are sorted and the sun sets. And explains that Papa Archeron had negotiated a temporary deal to allow Vasa to help from her keeper, and Vasa is going after the human queens now, probably. Like, that's her goal. And Lucien says to them, he was a good man. He loved you all very much. And then Feyre links arms with Lucien and starts walking away, Elain following them. Nesta stays behind. Nesta stays with the ashes of their father. Lucien says to Elain, I heard you made the killing blow. And Elain says, no, Nesta did. I just stabbed him. And Feyre says, so what now? Off with Vasa? And Lucien says, here first, to help. Then, who knows? Feyre elbows Elain. I was like, come on, girl. And Elain says, you should come to Velaris. And Lucien says, it would be my pleasure. They make it back to camp, and Feyre leaves Lucien and Elain to talk. And then Feyre finds Rhys with Prince Draken and Miriam, and is introduced to the two of them. And Feyre's like, oh my gosh, I've heard so much about you. Thanks for coming. And then Rhys is just chilling. And Feyre says to Rhys, for someone who is just dead, you seem remarkably relaxed. And then Rhys says, I'm glad you're bouncing back to your usual spirits, Feyre, darling. And then Miriam explains that Rhys was in the middle of telling them Feyre's story, since Feyre has already heard theirs. Jurian is elsewhere for the moment, but Mor had convinced Draken and Miriam not to kill him. Rhys explains he's with Lord Graysen's men, kind of seeing to the human wounded. Miriam apologizes for the whole island mishap things, with things being too hidden. And Feyre's like, actually, you know what? Since you're so hidden, could we leave the cauldron with you guys? And Draken's like, sure, we'll just like bring it with us and we leave in a few days. But Feyre wants to call a meeting before everyone leaves. And so the next day, they all gather at the Archeron family estate in the sitting room, which is one of the only rooms in the house that is still like usable, that wasn't too badly damaged during the fire. The High Lords arrive first, Baron and Eris, who are looking both a bit beat up to Mor's delight. Tamlin is next, who looks at Lucien dressed in night court leathers and then sneers and walks away without a word. It like hurts my feelings. I hope the boys become friends again. That's my real hope for Lucien. I hope he becomes friends with Blondie again. Then Draken and Miriam enter with some of their people, including Nephili, and then we get Callias and Vivian, Tarquin and Varian, Thessian and his captain, who is his love, and then Helion arrives last without a girlfriend. So sad. And then Jurian and Graysen arrive with a small contingent of other humans. And finally, Vasa arrives. And Vasa arrives and says to Feyre, "Are you Feyre Cursebreaker?" And Feyre's like, "Yes." And Vasa says, "I'm sorry about your father. He was a great man." And then he looks and she sees Nesta and she says, "You are Nesta." Feyre is wondering how her father must have described Nesta so that Vasa was so immediately sure that it was her. But Nesta doesn't respond. But Vasa says anyway, "I'm so sorry for your loss. I heard you slew the King of Hybern. He was a better father to me than my own. I owe much to him, and I will honor his memory as long as I live." And then Vasa's like, "Hey, I heard your nickname is Cursebreaker. Could you break my curse?" And Feyre's like, "I don't know." I know her nickname is Cursebreaker, but, like, I don't actually feel like she's that exceptional at breaking curses. Like, she did break a curse one time by, like, answering a riddle, but I wouldn't say, like, oh, she's so good at curse breaking. Like, I don't actually think that's her skill set, you know? Vasa explains that she has to go back to her keeper soon, that her, like, deal is up shortly, but maybe she can buy herself a little extra time waiting for the injured to be healed. And they're going to discuss the curse later, along with the threat that the other queens pose. Vasa goes on to say, "They will try to intervene with any sort of peace talks. Hybern sent them back before this battle, but I have no doubt that they were smart enough to encourage that, not to waste their armies here." And Nesta says, "But they will elsewhere?" And Vasa says, "We shall see. And you will think of other ways to help me." Nesta says, "Good luck with that." And then Feyre says, "Where are you going? The meeting is starting." And Nesta says, "Why should I be in there?" Feyre says, "You are the guest of honor. You killed the king." Shadows flickered in her face. "So what?" I blinked. "You are our emissary as well. You should be here for this." Nesta looked towards the stairs, and I noticed the object she clutched in her fist, the small wooden carving. I couldn't make out what manner of animal it was, but I knew the wood, knew the work. One of the little carvings our father had crafted. During those years, he hadn't done much of anything at all. I looked at her face before she could notice my attention. Nesta said, "Do you think it will work? This meeting? With so many fey ears in the room? Beyond." I didn't dare give my answer, but the truth. "I don't know, but I'm willing to try." I offered my hand to my sister. "I want you here with me." And Nesta takes her hand and they walk into the room together. And Feyre starts the meeting by saying this. "My name is Feyre Archeron. I was once human and now I am Fey. I call both worlds my home, and I would like to discuss renegotiating the treaty." They meet for many, many hours. Feyre tells her whole story, which, like, everyone at this point has heard it. Can you imagine you've just done war for, like, a full day? You're so tired. And then you go to this meeting where you have to have a 20-year-old girl tell you all her life story. And then Miriam and Draken tell their story too. And I, like, would for sure get in trouble for talking. I am notorious in a meeting for, like, getting in trouble for talking. I am gonna have a side convo. Sorry, I have to have a side convo. You want me to sit there and not yap the whole, like, hours and hours? I can't do it. I'm also not a fun person to bring with you to the movies. I, like, just have to yap. You might have noticed by the fact that I yap for hours and hours and hours on these videos. Like, I love yapping. There's nothing I love more. And, like, you can't stop, won't stop me, even if I'm in a situation that does not call for yapping. I have thoughts and I want to share them with you. The High Lords kind of, like, fight back and forth about, like, whether they should rebuild the wall and what that should look like. They stay until the early morning hours when they decide to call it for the night. Graysen leaves without even looking at Elain. Interesting. I'm curious about this boy. And then Jurian, as the meeting is ending, Jurian comes up to Feyre. "Where do you go now?" Jurian says, "Queen Vasa offered me a place within her court." Feyre says, "Are you going to accept?" And Jurian says, "What sort of court can a cursed queen have? She's bound to that Death Lord. She has to go back to his lake on the continent at some point. Too bad the king was so spectacularly beheaded by his sister. I bet he could have found a way to break that curse of yours." So he was, like, really evil, so I'm glad we didn't keep him alive, Jurian. I think that's a bad idea. Like, what did you want to do? Keep him in a ring as an eyeball? What was your plan, bud? Anyway, Feyre says, "Too bad indeed. Do you think we stand a chance of peace between all of us?" And Jurian says, "Yes, I do." A few days later, they head back to Velaris. And they arrive back in the townhouse, and Feyre thinks to herself, home. Home was the same. Home was untouched. And even though we had all bathed, as we stood there was a grime to us, like the blood hadn't entirely washed off. And I realized that home was indeed the same, but we perhaps were not. And Amren goes, "I suppose I shall have to eat real food now." And Cassian says, "A monumental sacrifice." Nesta's not doing well. She's barely spoken or eaten over the last few days. She didn't visit Cassian at all while he was healing. She's, like, devastated. Amren says to Nesta, "I'm surprised you didn't take the king's head back to have it stuffed and hung on your wall." And Mor says, "Some would consider that joke to be in bad taste, Amren." And Amren says, "I saved all your asses. I'm entitled to say what I want." And with that, Amren stalks out of the house and into the city streets. And Elain notes that the new Amren is even crankier than the old one, and everyone is laughing except Nesta. And Feyre's not sure what has happened to Nesta's powers since the Cauldron has kind of been like broken and remade, if the powers for Nesta remain or if breaking it had gotten rid of them. Cassian and Mor and Azriel head towards the sitting room, claiming that they need a drink. Rhys heads to the kitchens to get a snack. Lucien isn't there. He's back at the camps helping the wounded humans. Feyre hadn't seen Tamlin again, but she had sent a note via Lucien to Tamlin that says this: "Thank you. I hope you find happiness too." Which is nice of her. And then it's just the sisters alone in the foyer now. And Feyre says, "So what now?" And Nesta doesn't answer. She just leaves and goes back upstairs to her bedroom. And then Elain says, "With father, I don't think Nesta." And Feyre says, "I know. I think Nesta needs to sort through a lot." And Elain says, "Do we help her?" And Feyre says, "Yes, but not today. Not tomorrow. When she's ready." And Elain nods, smiling up at me. It was a tentative joy, and life that shone in her eyes, a promise of the future, gleaming and sweet. And the two of them head to the sitting room to get a drink with everyone else. And Elain kind of responds to Feyre's question, saying, "What now? I would like to build a garden. After all of this, I think the world needs more gardens." And Feyre says, "Yes, I think it does." Then we cut to Rhys's perspective. Chapter 81 is in Rhys' perspective. Rhys eavesdropping from the kitchen as the rest of them sit in the sitting room, and they just laugh and chat and drink, and he's just like listening to the sound of his family, who he never thought he was going to get to hear again. And then he hears his wife laugh, silvery and bright, more beautiful than any music played at one of Velaris' countless halls and theaters. And he's looking out the window, and Cassian comes in. And Cassian says, "You coming to drink, or are you just going to stare at the flowers all day?" Az and Cass are both standing in the doorway, and they've brought a drink for Rhys. And Rhys says, "Sneaking up on a High Lord is ill-advised." And Cass goes, "Why are you hiding in here?" The laughter of, like, the women filters into the sitting room again. And Azriel just says to his brother, "It's real." And Rhys says, "Let's not do this again for another 500 years. Cass says, "Well, and what are we going to do until then?" "Until then," I say to my brothers, slinging my arms around their shoulders and leading them back to the sitting room. I looked ahead towards that laugh, that light, that vision of a future Feyre had shown me, more beautiful than anything I could have ever wished for, anything I had wished for on those long ago solitary nights with only the stars for company. A dream, still unanswered, but not forever. Until then, we enjoy every heartbeat of it. Later, I think that night, Feyre and Rhys are up on the roof. Rhys is sitting in a chair, and Feyre slides into his lap, and they just sit in silence for a while. Feyre's in a scanty little nightgown, a gift from the women at the lingerie shop for saving the world again. And Rhys says, "Hasn't anyone told you you are disgustingly rich?" And Feyre says, "Just because I have money doesn't mean I need to spend it." And Rhys says, "Good. We need someone with a head for money around here. I've been bleeding out gold left and right thanks to our court of dreams taking advantage of my ridiculous generosity." They discuss whether Amren will still be their second, and Rhys says, "Yeah, for sure, if she still wants it, even without her powers." Although Rhys assumes even as just High Fae, she'll still be, like, terrifying. And they talk about how terrible it was when he died, and how Feyre's like, how terrible it was to, like, watch him disappear from the world. And Feyre says, "Never lie to me again, not about that." And I think Rhys jokes and says, like, "Can I lie to you about other stuff?" And Rhys says, "But about other things." I pinched his arm hard enough that he laughed and batted away my hand. "I couldn't let you ladies take all the credit for saving us. Some male had to claim a bit of glory, so you don't trample us all in the end of time with your bragging." And Feyre says to him, "When it's time to go, we go there together." And Rhys says, "It's a bargain." And they get new bargain tattoos. And I hate a death pack. And I hate this death pack most of all because there's absolutely no reason for it. For what reason? We know that Rhys is looking forward to becoming a parent. Both of them are. They've, like, talked about how they're going to have kids. And now they are in a death pact. They're also, like, co-rulers of this nation. So if one of them dies, both, like, they're, like, one of the perks of having, like, two leaders is that, like, if one of you dies, you still have the stability of having another. This is just, like, my least favorite thing in all of the world. I, like, hate the death pact in this book. It's my least favorite one there is. Anyway, they death pact. We learn that Bright Axis is still missing. Feyre's going to go hunt her down and put her back in the library eventually. And then they go out flying. Rhys is carrying Feyre at first as they fly over the city, watching just, like, Velaris and the people enjoy themselves in the evening. And then Feyre summons her own wings and they fly next to each other over Velaris. And she says it's a gift, all of it. And that is the end of Court of Wings and Ruin, the end of the original ACOTAR like trilogy. This is like the end of Feyre's story. We get A Court of Frost and Starlight. Next, the little novella. We'll talk about that, which again, I haven't read that before, so I'm excited to read that for the first time and probably pick up on things that maybe were important in Silver Flames. And then of course we have Silver Flames, Nesta's book, my beloved. I love Silver Flames so much. My second favorite book in the series. So excited to talk about that one with you guys. And those will be coming eventually. We'll probably take a little break from ACOTAR. Spice some other things in there, sprinkle things up, mix it up. I hope you enjoyed ACOTAR. I know I did. I love this book so much. I think it's so good. It's the book that like made me a Sarah J Maas lover, so it like will always have a special place in my heart. And I just like love how the story ends so much. Love the conclusion for the Archeron girlies. Okay, I will see you in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.